Chapter 539. The range of this phenomenon was so vast, and the changes were so violent that anyone, including those who had fled in all directions and were still wandering in the mountains, those who had already bid farewell to Cloud Mountain and were about to leave, and even those wandering souls who had fled in all directions, could see and feel it. At this time, the changes in the chi of heaven and earth were so violent that it had seriously affected everyone who had dense spiritual energy in their bodies. In other words, any human who had cultivated before and any demon who could transform into human form would be affected. One must know that the demonic energy and spiritual energy in one's body were sealed from the outside world. But there were always many entrances and exits that allowed people to communicate with the chi of heaven and earth when they used their demonic energy and spiritual energy. Therefore, whether it was humans or demons, the chi of heaven and earth were inextricably linked. The reason why Zither Monarch was seriously injured was because she opened the door in her body and accepted the violent demonic energy, resulting in a sudden backlash. Now, although these people and demons were not in the same special situation as Zither Monarch, their auras also underwent a drastic change under the influence of the chi of heaven and earth. In other words, the auras in these people's bodies were also in disorder. This disorder didn't have too much of an effect on high-level demons and cultivators. They could slowly adjust their breathing. The so-called effect was only when they used demonic energy and spiritual energy to perform magical abilities. The failure rate would increase to a terrifying level. However, for low-level demons and cultivators, it could only mean one thing: cultivation deviation. Since ancient times, this word was one of the main causes of death for cultivators and demons. Although cultivators had the experience of their predecessors and the protection of their sects, the techniques they practiced were extremely complicated. If they were not careful, they would be met with misfortune. Although demons didn't practice techniques, it was precisely because of this that if the aura in their body was circulating in the wrong direction, they would be in a situation of certain death. As a result, the surviving cultivators had no way to escape. A large number of low-level cultivators immediately showed signs of death. They had to stop where they were to regulate their breathing and ask the cultivators with higher cultivation to protect them. The low-level fiendish demons hiding in the mountains were not as lucky. They immediately fainted. Screams filled the mountains. Only now did they realize that there were so many people hiding in this seemingly dead area. At this moment, if someone opened his eye, he would see the souls of the dead that covered the mountains and the demon power that was refined from Guan Yuan's crypt rushing towards the Cloud Mountain. When Wanderer White's great formation was operating, it drove the souls that hadn't been absorbed by the two skeletons to Manwan Mountain, but it was powerless against the flesh and blood that had already formed on their bodies. However, when the chi of heaven and earth changed, even the fibers and the tiny eyeballs between the fibers were destroyed to the point of being unstable. Finally, they began to slowly fall down. It was as if the things attached to the surface of the two skeletons had begun to decay and decay. This caused a layer of gray fog to appear around the two skeletons. Those things formed this fog. The skeleton paused for a moment. The huge limbs emitted a long hoarse sound as if it was being squeezed by rust. The power peeling off from their bodies seemed to make them feel uneasy. This uneasiness then turned into anger. The skeleton sped up towards Cloud Mountain. It was as if it wanted to take back all the power from that place. At this time they were actually very close to the Cloud Mountain. If they sped up again, it would only take them a dozen breaths to reach the foot of the mountain. Looking at it this way, the mountain looked like a mushroom and the two skeletons looked like two ants. But no one would doubt the power of these two ants. When everyone was affected by the chaotic chi, they seemed to be even more excited. The skeleton raised its arms. The first hit landed on the mountain wall. The movements of the two skeletons were surprisingly consistent, as if they were two bodies controlled by the same thought. 4 fists bombarded the mountain with terrifying power, producing a rumbling sound like muffled thunder. There was a prohibition around Cloud Mountain. When Li Yunxin wanted to enter Cloud Mountain, he had to die again because he couldn't get around the prohibition. The prohibition would channel powerful spiritual power into the intruder's body, causing him to explode. But for these skeletons, not only did the prohibition not become a prohibition, but it also became the source of their power. So the prohibition seemed to be turned off. The skeleton's fists directly hit the surface of Cloud Mountain. It was like a person hitting a thick old mattress with his hand. A cloud of dust rose from the surface of Cloud Mountain. But just like the dust it stirred up when it fell, those things were actually made of rather large boulders. But such a blow was no different from scratching an itch for Cloud Mountain. The huge mountain didn't even tremble, and the surging spiritual power was still gathering in the mountain. The spiritual power was like the wind that whistled past the two skeletons. It was what they dreamed of, but they couldn't touch it or grab it. But it seemed that because they were getting closer to Cloud Mountain, the things that made up their flesh and blood collapsed more and more. Before this, it was just a faint gray cloud of dust. But now, they were like Long Sun who was summoning the rain in clouds. The two huge bodies were shrouded in thick black fog, and their silhouettes couldn't be seen clearly. Seeing this, Emperor Li hugged the Guqin Jun, whose limbs were hanging limply in his arms. He was stunned for a while and frowned. He muttered to himself, "Strange, strange." Previously when he fought with the Guqin Jun it was extremely shocking. Only when the storm subsided did Emperor Yi dare to show himself. He turned into a gust of black wind and swept to Emperor Li's side. He saw the person in Emperor Li's arms and was shocked. "Brother Ji Yu." Emperor Li came back to his senses. He glanced at the beauty in his arms. Her face was pale and her breathing was extremely weak. Half of her hair was untied, hanging down like a black cloud, covering half of her face. Her eyes were tightly closed. Her long, butterfly-like eyelashes cast a shadow on her snow-white face. She had smeared blood on her mouth, but it wasn't black and red, but golden. Under the glow of the sky, it glowed faintly, adding to her demonic charm. Seeing this, Emperor Li was heartbroken. I didn't know what she was thinking and I was too excited. I actually hurt her. It hurt so much, it hurt so much. Her feelings? Emperor Yi frowned, not understanding. What feelings does she have? Emperor Li didn't say more. He looked up at Yunshan. "Brother Liu, let me ask you, look at the huge commotion over there. Who did it?" Emperor Li's thoughts were erratic and Emperor Yi couldn't keep up. Before he could answer, Emperor Li said, "Tell me, is it Li Yunshin who did it?" Emperor Yi seemed to be in a daze tonight. He didn't know how to answer every question Emperor Li asked. For example, today, he did tell Emperor Li about Li Yunshin's abilities. But when he met him in the Manwan Mountain, Emperor Li looked down on Li Yunshin. It wasn't until today that Emperor Li's impression of him changed. Just as he had said, almost everyone was dead. Although Emperor Li was a supreme, he had the demeanor of a hero in the pugilistic world. Once he approved of someone, he wouldn't hesitate to praise him. Emperor Yi didn't think that Li Yunshin was responsible for the earth-shattering commotion. When he met Li Yunshin in the Manwan Mountain, Li Yunshin was still in the true realm. How could a fiendish demon of the true state do something like this? But Emperor Yi and Li Yunshin had a good relationship. In fact, he might even be one of the few fiendish demons who had the deepest friendship with him among all the fiendish demons in the world. Thus he couldn't retort. He wanted to speak but Emperor Li interrupted. He pointed far away. "Hee, you don't believe me. Then look over there." Emperor Yi sighed in his heart and looked over. If it was another demon he wouldn't be so obedient. But this ghost emperor was Emperor Li. Firstly, the Li Kingdom was the biggest country in the world. Secondly, when the Yi Kingdom had been destroyed by the Qin Kingdom, he had defended the city of Wei for dozens of years. There was also the Li Kingdom's contribution. The Yi Kingdom had a Princess Yanshuan who had married far away to the Li Kingdom and had given birth to descendants. Thus, when the Yi Kingdom was left with only one city, the Li Kingdom supported it in secret and mediated with the Qin Kingdom outside. The reason why there hadn't been a change of dynasties in the world was because the Xianmen didn't allow it. When the Qin Kingdom took over, they all knew that it was because they had the approval of the Xianmen. Even the Li Kingdom needed some courage to openly and covertly oppose the Qin Kingdom's Zhonglu Xingui at such a time. Emperor Yi became a ghost emperor and was a ghost emperor that valued friendship. Because of these two reasons, when he followed Emperor Li, he didn't have the discord between normal demons. On the contrary, he was very harmonious. Now, he also looked in the direction Emperor Li was pointing at. After looking for a while, he didn't see anything. After looking for a while, he found something strange. At this moment, everyone's attention should be attracted by the two skeletons. Because of the heavy light and shadows in the sky and the flying dust on the ground, it was hard to notice anything else. However, the two ghost emperors were hiding here. Because of the angle, they could see the back of the Cloud Mountain. In the shadow of the Cloud Mountain, there seemed to be an extremely small dust-like figure bumping around like a headless fly. It seemed like it also wanted to sneak into the Cloud Mountain but couldn't do it. It was so anxious that it ran around randomly. Emperor Yi frowned. "That is," Emperor Li snickered. "Do you remember that I told you before that I was going to the Cloud Mountain to pick some souls to use? When I went there, I saw a huge battle. If I had to say, the people fighting had higher cultivation than me." Emperor Yi suddenly understood. Oh, the fire cloud from before. Yes. Emperor Li said as he touched the face of the beauty in his arms. His fingertips instantly felt smooth. I looked from afar. Those people were dressed like those stinky Taoists from the Taoists of the Taoists. But there seemed to be internal strife among these Taoist priests. One of them killed 4 or 5 of them, and the rest scattered like birds and beasts. Brother, you know that I fought with the Taoists from the Taoists of the Taoists before. Although they are Taoists, their aura is different. Especially the one who killed his companions. I think his aura is similar to the ghost Tao. I guess that the Taoists suffered a crushing defeat because of an internal conflict. But it doesn't matter. After the remaining Taoist swallowed his companions, he ran towards the cloud mountain like a madman. He was still shouting something like Li Yunxin, I, Su Yusong will tear you into pieces. Brother Su Yusong. Emperor Yi blinked his eyes in confusion. Then he exclaimed, Isn't that the name of the calligrapher? Yi. That's right. Emperor Li laughed. Otherwise, how can I guess that the current situation is caused by Li Yunxin? It seemed that even the sage of calligrapher had fallen into his trap. Now it seems that he has locked Yunshan up. That master of calligrapher wants to go in to seek revenge, but he can't. If I were that old guy, I'm afraid that I would die of anger before I am killed. Speaking of this, he couldn't help but laugh. When I just achieved Taoism, those reckless Taoists of the Taoists were instructed by the 2 old guys to kill me. At that time, I swore that one day I would kill my way to the Cloud Mountain and kill all those stinky Taoists, especially the 2 culprits. In the end, it was Li Yunxin who helped me vent my anger. Wow, I owe him a favor this time. This kid is really capable. Now the Taoists are destroyed. My ghost kingdom is getting stronger and stronger. I have a beauty in my arms. Life is just like that. I really regret that I didn't die earlier. He was talking excitedly and in high spirits. Then he stretched out his big hand, wanting to reach into Zither Monarch's chest and knead it. But when he touched her collar, he retracted his hand and shook his hand. He muttered to himself, No. Such a beauty. It's not fun to do it quietly. It would only be interesting if they were in perfect harmony with each other. I'd better cure her first. I can't. What if she runs away? It's better to think of a foolproof plan. Emperor Yi saw him like this and couldn't help but advise, Brother, let's find out the origin of this monster first. What? Emperor Li smiled. Brother Liu, you think too much. So what if we find out? It's easy for others. But such a beauty, even if she is the incarnation of Shinryu, I can't bear to let her go. Life is full of joy. Haven't I had enough of being afraid? Emperor Yi knew Emperor Li's pride. He didn't say anything more. What happened in the distance was important to many people. But to these 2 ghost emperors, it wasn't important. Thus, with a flicker of his body, he turned into a gust of black wind and returned to his temple. But at this moment, they heard the 2 skeletons in the distance let out terrifying screams. The screeches they made when they were advancing were more like a meaningless venting. But now it seemed like they were in extreme pain. Looking at them again at this time, one would find that they had become bony again. The closer they got to the Cloud Mountain, the faster their flesh and blood were eroded. The 2 skeletons weren't able to break the Cloud Mountain, but they were about to turn back into bare bones. They screamed and turned around as though they wanted to leave the Cloud Mountain. But at this moment, Emperor Li and Emperor Yi felt a slight shock in their hearts. Even the energy in their bodies trembled. They sensed an obvious, almost tangible malice. The skeletons locked onto them. Chapter 540. In fact, the 2 ghost kings were not the only ones targeted by the skeletons. Even the Zither lady in his arms, Su Yusong, who was cursing crazily outside Cloud Mountain, the surviving cultivators who stayed at the edge of the battlefield, and everything else within the range of the skeleton's chi activity, who possessed cultivation and abilities beyond that of mortals, were all locked onto. If one had to find an explanation, perhaps it could be said that the power of the skeletons was constantly being eroded by the arrays in this world. They could no longer get magic power from the souls of the dead in the wilderness or from Yunshan, so they settled for the next best thing and targeted the high-level cultivators and demons. As for the others with low cultivation, they could be considered as side dishes that he had conveniently picked up. Almost everyone felt an inexplicable fear at the same time. This fear was deep and distant, like the pressure that low-level demons felt when they saw dragons. Even a ghost emperor like Emperor Li, who had become a ghost, felt this. It was extremely creepy. Once the fear arose, the skeletons immediately ran like crazy. Before, they were just walking slowly toward Yunshan, but now they showed amazing agility and speed. The 2 skeletons moved in unison. Their huge feet hit the ground heavily, as if 4 drumsticks were beating the war drum of the earth. The ground shook crazily. Even the trees at the edge of the mountain began to fall, and even the millstone-sized rocks jumped up from the ground like gravel. It only took the time of 2 breaths. The skeletons went from walking slowly to running, and then their huge bodies tore through the air, forming clouds of exploding mist around them, and then moving so fast that their silhouettes could barely be seen, only blurred shadows. It only took the time of 2 breaths. This sudden change made Emperor Li's expression change greatly. Then he suddenly shouted, "Motherf *Ker, this Li Yunxin kid is so vicious. Brother Liu, let's go." After saying this, he turned around and rushed into the distance. Emperor Yi was only a little slower than him. His expression also changed greatly and he chased after them. Both of them had an ominous thought. Now they could only pray that this thought was not true, that Li Yunxin was not as vicious as Emperor Li said. However, Emperor Li left much faster than Emperor Yi. In a breath's time, he disappeared into the horizon. After another 2 breaths, Emperor Yi finally caught up to him. The 2 of them had already flown 20 miles. Emperor Li stood up. Just as he was puzzled, he suddenly felt a gentle resistance in front of him. If it was an ordinary cultivator from the mystic sect, they would be extremely familiar with this resistance. It was a restriction of Taoist techniques. Just like the vast majority of restrictions in this world, one could continue forward after reaching this point. But no matter how much strength he exerted, as long as he did not find the right method, he would always be stuck in the same place, never able to walk out. He felt a chill in his heart. The 2 of them had chosen a random direction to escape in, and they had encountered such a restrictive spell. Even Emperor Li, who was in the profound realm, could do nothing about it. Then, there was no doubt that there were similar restrictions in the other directions. At this moment, Emperor Li cursed again, "What a vicious bastard." The flow of energy in the world suddenly reversed, causing the flow of energy in everyone's bodies to become chaotic. Then he sucked away the magic power of the 2 skeletons. Because the skeletons couldn't break through from Yunshan, they could only turn to kill the remaining demons and cultivators in the battlefield. At this time, he enclosed the vast battlefield. If this was really done by Li Yunxin and he did it through some means, then he was truly vicious. The Freemasonry's wandering souls and Dragon Sun just wanted to sacrifice the demon soldiers, demon generals and low-level cultivators, and then take what they needed. This kind of method was appalling to hear. It made people sigh that the beasts were indeed ruthless, cruel and ruthless. But now, Li Yunxin was even more vicious than them. Not only did he not let go of the low-level demon soldiers, demon generals and cultivators, but he also seemed to want to use the 2 skeletons to kill all the remaining demons and cultivators. When Emperor Li thought of this, even someone as fearless as him was scared to the point of breaking into a cold sweat. He also saw that the 2 skeletons had rushed to the northwest. Suddenly, dazzling light burst out on the flat ground like fireworks. He knew that was the direction where the thousands of surviving Taoist priests of the Shenmen sect had retreated. A large number of low-level cultivators could only adjust their breath where they were, and the high-level cultivators' magical powers and spells were greatly reduced. This group of people was the biggest target. The skeletons went straight to them and now they fought. But that fireworks-like light was fleeting. Very soon it returned to darkness. It was unknown whether the thousands of people had been completely obliterated by this attack, or if the high-grade cultivators had abandoned them and fled upon seeing that the situation was far from good. But no matter what, there were thousands of people. It happened so quietly, which made Emperor Li and Emperor Ye's faces turn green. At this moment, when Emperor Li muttered, "Li Yunxin, this vicious brat, Li Yunxin, this vicious brat," the air in front of them suddenly twisted. A blurry, flickering figure appeared in front of the 2 ghost emperors. It's not a good habit to speak ill of people behind their backs, Brother Ji. Looking at the face and figure, who else could it be but Li Yunxin? Emperor Li and Emperor Yi were stunned. But soon Emperor Li frowned. "Li Yunxin, you brat. Do you want to lock us here and kill us?" Li Yunxin's figure smiled. "Alas, you can eat whatever you want but you can't say whatever you want. If you say it like this, people will think that I, Li Yunxin, am vicious and vicious. You have to be responsible." Emperor Yi, who had been staring at him, heaved a sigh of relief. He said, "This is indeed Brother Li's tone." Emperor Li glared at him angrily. "Then you," Li Yunxin's figure waved his hand. "Don't rush. Listen to me. I'm using Yunshan's restriction to appear. I'm not familiar with it yet. Let's make it short. There is a layer of restriction outside Yunshan to prevent people from breaking in. If someone intrudes, spiritual energy will pour into that person's body and cause him to explode. Now, I have found a way to spread this restriction. So, with Cloud Mountain as the center, the area within a radius of 200 li is the range of this restriction. It's to prevent the skeletons of the two ancient demons from escaping. I didn't mean to trap you. As for what Brother G said about me, I don't know anything, haha. But I have a favor to ask of you too. 50 li to the south of Mount Cloudy Mountain. When you get there you will see a small hill. There is a dense forest on the north side of the mountain. There is a cave on the west side of the forest. One of them is called Lu Gongzan, and the other is called Shanji. Brother Liu should know them. I'll have to trouble you two to go there and help me save the two of them first. I will set up another restriction there to ensure that you will not have to worry about your lives. Emperor Li and Emperor Yi looked at each other. Emperor Yi said, Lu Gongzan and Shanji? Oh, I know. They were your demon generals in the city of Wei. Hearing that, Emperor Li was reassured. His anger immediately turned into joy. Good. I've long known that Brother Li Yunxin isn't a heartless person. Don't worry. Leave it to us. As long as we are safe, your two demon generals will be safe. Li Yunxin smiled. His figure was about to disappear but stopped. He seemed to notice the person in Emperor Li's arms. He looked at her in silence for about 2 breaths. Then he smiled again. Oh, Brother G is in a good mood. You still want to take the beauty with you at this time. With Li Yunxin's promise, Emperor Li was in a good mood. Hearing him praise the beauty in his arms, he became proud again. He touched the face of the zither lady and said, Hee. She is a little horse with a good cultivation. Brother Li, do you know who she is? Li Yunxin suddenly said, Oh? What did you say? Oh, I can't hear you. A horse is hard to tame. Brother G, you can't be careless. Oh, there is no signal. His figure turned into motes of light and quickly dissipated. The two ghost emperors looked at each other and hesitated for a while. But they felt that Li Yunxin had no reason to harm them. Thus, he transformed into a black gust of wind and whizzed in the direction he mentioned. The skeleton killed more than 1,000 low-level cultivators and headed straight for the south. There were 2 ghost emperors in the south. Since the ghost emperors left, the skeleton did not change its direction. Obviously, it was not coming for the 2 of them. It was someone else. Someone else who was also in the Guanyuan crypt not far from the south. Heaven-span Lord Yazi was originally in a deep sleep. Since he was sleeping, another consciousness in his body woke up. It was the soul of Dragon Jiao. When Li Yunxin saw him in the Golden Palace of Hatred 10 days ago, Dragon Jiao was already a little crazy, as if his mind was damaged. Even now he was still trapped in the room like that night. But there seemed to be nothing in the room for him to smash. It was just an empty room with a strong restriction that prevented him from going out. He could only wander around the room. At this time, the sudden change of qi movement also affected the Guanyuan crypt. The crypt was like the acupoints on the ground. The flow of qi movement in it was much more complicated than on the flat plane. At this time, the qi movement in the whole land changed, and the qi movement in the crypt changed even more violently. According to Li Yunxin's previous speculation, the Golden Palace of Hatred was actually one of the 8 treasures ancient scrolls of the painting saint. When he painted the 100 miles of rivers and mountains in the city of Wei, and when he saw the evil king's fog sending slaves to Decai Di Mao in the Pitfall Mountain, he knew that the scrolls created by high-level painting skills were inextricably linked with the Reiki of heaven and earth. They were the projection of the Reiki of heaven and earth, and at the same time, they existed independently in a strange state. Therefore, when the qi movement in the crypt changed, the Golden Palace of the Scrolls was also greatly affected. Half of it immediately collapsed. However, this collapse did not seem like an ordinary palace, with broken bricks and tiles falling down. Instead, half of it stood majestically, and the other half became an ink-like shadow, as if there were only a few lines left, and between the lines was the void. There were many demon servants and demon soldiers in the hall. At this moment they had all turned into small ink figures, embedded in the shadows and not moving at all. Therefore the inhibition was opened. When Li Yunxin left the Guanyuan crypt, there were tens of thousands of demons hiding in the huge cave, and there were flames and noises everywhere. But by this time the cave had become pitch black, and it was as silent as a dark wasteland that had been uninhabited since ancient times. Because of the change in qi movement, the glorious Golden Palace also became dim after the collapse. Only the dotted lines were emitting a faint fluorescent light, which made them seem more unreal, as if they were projections embedded in the night sky. After a few breaths, a voice suddenly shouted, I'm out. Hatred, or the 9th young master, jumped out of the dim Golden Palace and landed on the ground. Perhaps it was because he had not tasted freedom for a long time, or because of the influence of the qi movement between heaven and earth, or because his mind was gradually eroded by hatred's will. He stumbled as he walked as if he was drunk. Hatred's body was originally injured by the skeleton, and he lost half of his head. At this time, his hair was disheveled, and his movement and expression made him look like a madman. There was no trace of the evil charm and handsome appearance when Li Yunxin first saw him. He walked aimlessly in the dark for a while and then murmured to himself, "Where is he? Where is he? Where is that little figure?" After saying that, he reached out and touched around as if he was trying to catch something. After a while he patted his head and froze on the spot. In the dark, he raised his eyebrows and gritted his teeth. I remember, he ran away. He took my body and ran away. He took my body. Damnly. He repeated the word, Li, many times, but he could not remember the last two words. After muttering for a while, he patted his head again. Why am I here? Someone said he was going to save me. Someone said he was going to save me. Who saved me? I have to thank you. He frowned and couldn't go on. He didn't know whether it was because of thinking or patting his head. At this time, a green and flickering figure suddenly lit up in the dark. In fact, it had been there for a while. It was behind him, listening to him quietly. But it didn't open its mouth until now, and its voice was full of surprise. "Ninth young master. I saved you." The ninth young master was startled. He jumped away like a frightened rabbit, turned his head to look at the figure and shouted, "How dare you? Who are you?" But when he saw it clearly, his eyes went blank again. He pointed at him. You are. Li. I am Li Yunxin, the ninth young master." The virtual figure of Li Yunxin said immediately, "Do you remember? Before this I promised you that I would save you. You were imprisoned by your second brother, and I promised you that I would save you." When Li Yunxin met the ninth young master, she already knew what Yizi had done. Now that he was here, due to the slow merging of their consciousnesses, he also had some impression of what Yizi had done. But Long Jio's consciousness was more chaotic than before. After he said so, Long Jio blinked his eyes for a long time and then said in a daze, "There is such a thing. You promised to save me. But I still remember that someone wanted to harm." "Yes, someone wanted to harm you." The virtual figure of Li Yunxin shouted, "Think about it, who wanted to harm you these days? It was your second brother who wanted to swallow you. Isn't that what you are most afraid of?" The ninth young master immediately widened his eyes and mouth. Yes. He wanted to swallow me. He imprisoned me." After saying this, he seemed to remember something. He clapped his hands and said happily, "I remember, I wanted you to save me and you really saved me. Good friend, tell me, what do you want me to reward you?" The virtual figure smiled. "You don't have to say these words. Now I just asked you to be a free body. But once the sun rises, your second brother Hatred, the second brother who imprisoned you these days, who made you feel despair and pain, who wanted to swallow you alive, will lock you up again. You have to think of a way to imprison his body first. And then, I have prepared a body for you here. At that time, you will destroy this body and possess the body I have prepared for you. Then you will be free of worries, ninth young master." The ninth young master thought for a while, blinked and frowned. Li Yunxin smiled. "In other words, listen to me first and imprison this body. Do you understand?" The ninth young master nodded blankly. "Then kill yourself so that your soul can leave your body. When your soul leaves your body, you can possess the body I have prepared for you. Do you understand?" The ninth young master thought for a while and nodded. "Then my second brothers? Leave it to me," Li Yunxin said sincerely and seriously. "This time I won't let him hurt you again." The ninth young master thought for a long time and said happily, Good. You are really a good man." Chapter 541. Hearing this, the light shadow's tone softened a lot, and it even sounded a little emotional. "Anyway, you are the one who gave me what I have now. Consider it as me paying you back." The ninth young master didn't understand what he meant, but he frowned slightly as if he was thinking about something else. Li Yunxin's virtual image immediately said, "Ninth young master, we don't have much time to think. Didn't you sense something terrible approaching?" The terrible thing he was referring to was the two skeletons that were running towards them. The skeletons looked terrifying, but everyone could see that they didn't seem to have any intelligence at the moment. They were more like muddle-headed beasts. Maybe they used to be smart, but because they hadn't fully recovered, they could only rely on their instincts. Therefore, these things were hard to reason with, but they could be dealt with by taking advantage of the situation. For example, it was Li Yunxin who led them to come here. He was the one who made a strong spiritual power appear in the Guanyuan crypt. That spiritual power was like sweet dew to the two skeletons. So he didn't care about anything else, he only had eyes for this place. It was easy to say but difficult to do. But the ninth young master was the key link after he made a major discovery in the Little Cloud Mountain. It was necessary to take him down. What he said to the two ghost emperors was not false. The restriction outside the Cloud Mountain that prevented people from entering was actually not only for defensive purposes. It could also be turned into an offensive weapon by adjusting the internal chi of the Little Cloud Mountain. If he used this method earlier, the demons would die no matter how many came. But the wandering souls didn't really want to kill the demons. They wanted to kill the cultivators as well. Therefore, it gave Li Yunxin a chance to take advantage of it and put himself in such a situation. It could be said that he was harming himself in the end. Right now, his illusory image was using this formation to appear behind Ninth Young Master and listen to his crazy ramblings. Therefore he knew. Compared to the last time he saw Long Jiao in Hatred's body, he seemed to be even crazier now. Ninth Young Master was originally a brutal demon that did not understand the ways of the world. But from a demon's point of view, most of what he did in the past was based on instinct, nothing out of the ordinary. Although he was terrifying in the eyes of humans, compared to other fiendish demons, compared to his eldest brother and second brother, or even compared to the wandering souls of the Freemasons, or compared to some cultivators of the Orthodoxy sword sect, he could almost bear the label of naive and unaffected. If he wasn't born in a demon's home but in the human world, perhaps he would still be a gentle young master. Now that the ninth young master's mind was worn out and his memory was in a mess, he could be called naive. Of course, Li Yunxin did not have the ability to make him completely forget the past, but he had other means. The ninth young master was imprisoned in Hatred's body. Using the words he said to Li Yunxin that night, it was an unimaginably horrible experience. Now that he escaped from the cell due to the disorder of the chi of heaven and earth, the first thing he felt was joy and relief. But because of this joy, the second thing was a greater horror. What was the most terrible torture to a person? It was to give him hope and then cut off his hope. The ninth young master, who was imprisoned in Hatred's body, thought that he would eventually be resurrected, now experienced a short period of freedom. Of course, he was most afraid of dawn, afraid that he would be imprisoned in the end. He didn't need any means to deal with this terrible fear, just a few words could make him subconsciously ignore a lot of things. And now, after listening to Li Yunxin's words, he did feel the terrible atmosphere. He used to be in the transcendent state, but now the body of hatred was in the mysterious state. Although he was seriously injured and although he couldn't control his body as he wished, his senses were still sharp. Once he sensed the terrible atmosphere, the joy on his face disappeared. He opened his eyes wide. It was no wonder that he was shocked. Although his cultivation was weak in the past, he was still a dragon's. How could other demons give him such an experience? An irresistible sense of oppression. Your second brother, Hatred, should have an impression in his head. This thing was released by him and your brother to destroy Shenmen. The Shadow's words were getting more and more worried and nervous. But do you know the situation now? Now that they have all failed and you escaped from the cell with your second brother's body, these two things are naturally back to catch you. If you don't leave now, it will be too late. The ninth young master turned pale with fright and anxiously spun on the spot. Catch me? Catch me? What should I do? I can't go back. I can't go back even if I die. I'm going to fight them now. Li Yunxin hurriedly said, Ninth young master, have you forgotten what I told you? You must leave now. With your fastest speed, go to the northeast. When you reach the battlefield in the northeast, I will designate a place for you. He recounted everything in detail. At this time, what he said was like a life-saving straw for the ninth young master, who was about to be overwhelmed by the double fear. He didn't have time to think about it. As soon as he finished his words, the body of hatred and the soul of Dragon 9 immediately turned into a gust of demonic wind and went straight to the battlefield in the northeast that Li Yunxin mentioned. He used the body of hatred to escape with all his might. Of course, his speed was impressive. As soon as he got out of the cave, he saw the two huge figures rushing towards him. He didn't suspect anything. It only took him a dozen breaths' time to escape more than 10 miles away. He arrived at the battlefield that Li Yunxin mentioned. Looking up, it was empty and desolate. The battlefield was full of corpses and broken armors. It was the place where Li Yunxin faked his death a few days ago. At this moment, the shadow of Li Yunxin appeared beside him again, guiding him to the depth of the pile of corpses. He went straight to a place where the corpses were piled up like a mountain and asked him to dig down. The ninth young master used his demonic power and turned over all the corpses in just 3 or 4 moves. He could only see a lot of fragmented corpses under the dim light from the top of the sky. The shadow of Li Yunxin pointed at a fragment. It looked like the edge of a big knife. He said solemnly, "This is it. My temporary residence is right here. Take it and hide it." After saying this, he didn't say anything else. Although the shadow was not stable and the face was a little blurry, it could still be seen that his eyes were bright like 2 sharp knives. But his eyes were bright like 2 sharp knives. He was staring at the ninth young master, who seemed to be scared out of his wits and had nowhere to go. The ninth young master immediately took the thing in his hand, but he didn't know what it was. He poured his demonic power into it as usual, but it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no reaction at all. He became impatient and started to mutter to himself, "What? What happened? How did I hide it? How did I hide it? How did I hide it? Teach me." Then he became angry and impatient again. The shadow of Li Yunxin looked at him for a few breaths' time and suddenly said, "Ah, I was wrong. Ninth young master, walk a dozen steps to the north and dig again." That ninth young master didn't even say a word. He flew over again and used his demonic power to dig up the corpse and the soil that was soaked black. This time he finally saw something different. A folding fan was stuck in the ground. It was clean and glowed faintly in the sky. "You hide here first," the shadow said seriously. "Hide in the fan. There is a magic array I set in it. It can hold hundreds of thousands of dead souls. It's not a problem to store your body." The ninth young master said, "And then? What about me? How long do I have to hide? You said you would save me." "You are, Lily." He was interrupted immediately. "Of course I will save you. You touch the handle of the fan first. See if you can touch anything." Hearing this, the ninth young master reached out his hand subconsciously, and then he was slightly stunned. Li Yunxin's temporary imperial residence was opened. His hand reached in without any hindrance and touched an iron chain. The iron chain was like a venomous snake. As soon as it touched his fingertips, it slithered up his arms and rushed out, tightly wrapping around his body. It was the soul-hooking iron chain that Bai Yanjun left for him. It could be long or short and had endless transformations. Now, in just an instant, it had wrapped around the Yazi's upper body and legs like armor, leaving only its arms outside. The ninth young master fell to the ground immediately and shouted, "What is this? What do you want to do?" "Of course I want to save you," Li Yunxin said seriously. "The dragon's soul is not extinguished. If you die here now, your soul and your second brother's soul won't be free. They'll run to a new cell. Do you want to live like that?" The ninth young master blinked his eyes. "Of course I don't. I don't want to." "Then we have to find a new body for your soul," Li Yunxin said in a low voice. "I can draw a new body for you. It's your old appearance. When you die, your soul will run to your new body and be free. Your second brother's soul will be locked on the fan to prevent him from harming you again. Now that I've restrained you, it's also because I'm afraid that he'll suddenly go on a rampage and ruin our plan. Do you believe me now?" The ninth young master blinked his eyes and frowned. He seemed to remember something, but it was not clear. So he didn't care about it for a while. But in the end, the fear of losing his freedom and himself prevailed. He said hesitantly, "I believe you." Then use the method of transforming the soul into the real body and create an incarnation. Li Yunxin said firmly, "To create a new body for you, I still have something to study. I need the Jade Slip of Clarity. The Jade Slip of Clarity is 50 miles to the east. Take the Jade Slip and other treasures and ask your incarnation to go to Cloud Mountain. I'll get it. If I get it, I can finish everything before dawn and give you back your freedom. Now go quickly. If your second brother wakes up by force, you won't have a chance at all." His tone was urgent and strict, urging repeatedly. The ninth young master's mind was muddled, so he could only listen to him. He could use the body of hatred to do something. He immediately created a real body and went straight to the 50 miles away mentioned by Li Yunxin. It was actually the place where Su Yusong, Zhuomuxia, and the others fought with Red Lady. After the death of Li Yunxin, the two sides were in a stalemate, advancing and retreating, and the main direction of attack changed several times. Now the incarnation followed the hint given by Li Yunxin, found the place where the lava was overflowing, and soon found the Jade Slip of Clarity. This thing was kept in Su Yusong's leather bag before. Later he met Red Lady, and in order to save Zhuomuxia, he threw the treasure out. But in the end he couldn't save Zhuomuxia. Not only did Zhuomuxia die, but his obsession was also half broken. He became a monster that only wanted to tear Li Yunxin into pieces. How could he still have the mood to collect the treasure? Therefore, the jade slip of clarity, as well as many other people and things, were now lying quietly on the black rock that had solidified but was still shockingly hot. It was this thing that caused a series of disturbances and led Li Yunxin to the situation he was in today. However, at this moment, when all the powerful people in the world gathered and died like meteors, this thing that had been snatched by everyone was now lying on the ground like an abandoned thing. When Yazi, or rather, the incarnation of Ninth Young Master, landed here, he saw the translucent jade slip at first glance. Among all the magic treasures and puppets, this was the only one that was transparent and particularly eye-catching. The virtual image of Li Yunxin appeared next to him again and said in a low voice, "Take this thing and the rest of the things on the ground, and go to the direction of Yunshan. I'm now controlling the tactical formation on the mountain, so I can't go too far away from Yunshan. You have to go to the foot of the mountain to give it to me." However, although he said this, the Ninth Young Master didn't move. He stared at the jade slip for a while with a frown, and then slowly walked over and bent down to pick it up. He held it in his palm and touched it gently. Li Yunxin shouted again, "Hurry up! We don't have much time." When his image said this, the Ninth Young Master turned sideways to him, lowered his head and frowned as if he was thinking about something. However, when he shouted again, the Ninth Young Master suddenly raised his head. The fear and hesitation on his face disappeared and became cold. In fact, it was more like he had frozen some other strong emotions into a block of ice and covered his face. Translucent jade scroll. Translucent jade scroll. I remember this thing. He stared at it and murmured, "I used my reverse scale to exchange for it. Of course I remember." Then he suddenly opened his mouth and roared with grief and indignation, "Li Yunxin! You are Li Yunxin! Ah!" He grinned and laughed, but his laughter sounded like a cry of sorrow. "Do you still want to hurt me? Do you still want to hurt me today?" Beside him, the virtual image of Li Yunxin flickered for a while, but he was also silent for a while. Then he laughed. His tone was not as serious and urgent as before. "Okay. I thought many things would make you remember yourself, but I didn't expect that it was this thing that made you come back to your senses." The Ninth Young Master stared at him and sneered, "Yes. Now you are the Ninth Dragon's son and you are proud of yourself. It's not surprising that you have forgotten the past." Chapter 542. But the image shook his head, "But this time I didn't want to hurt you. Ninth Young Master, I did want to save you. If you didn't believe this, why did you beg me in the Golden Palace of Hatred?" "Believe? What do you believe?" The Ninth Young Master stared at him with his eyes wide open. "Believe that you, a kind and honest man, tricked me into tying my real body 50 miles away, was to save me?" The virtual image of Li Yunxin stood up straight and sighed, "To save you." Hearing this, the Ninth Young Master immediately laughed grimly, Good, Li Yunxin. I used to say that you were interesting. It seems that you are still interesting. Tell me, how did you save me? Instead, you tied me up?" When he ran out of Guan Yuan's crypt, half of his head was missing. His hair was disheveled and he looked frightened. He looked miserable and ugly. But at this moment, a ferocious look appeared on his face. Because he remembered the past and the old grudges, he didn't seem to care about his own life and death. He stood up proudly and his temperament was different. Although his hair was also disheveled, there was an additional sense of sadness and heroism. "Because if I didn't do this you wouldn't have believed me," Li Yunxin said calmly. "I told you the truth in the crypt. But I was afraid that you would end up like this, so I tied you up first. At this time you have to believe me even if you don't believe me. If not, with your temper I guess you would have turned around and left." I stumbled around for a while and then I found that I had nowhere to go. At that time, even if you wanted to live, even I couldn't do anything. The Ninth Young Master squinted at him. "I don't believe you and I don't listen to you. So what? I've died once. So what if I die again?" After saying this, he squeezed the jade script of illumination in his hand and suddenly laughed crazily. "Ah, good. This thing is called the jade script of illumination. Ah. Today I'll break it and make your wish come true. I'll let you have a taste. Don't use my mistakes to punish yourself, Ninth Young Master." Just as he was laughing like this, looking as if his mind was about to become muddled again, Li Yunxin suddenly interrupted him. His blurry face was filled with sincerity and solemnity. Suddenly he spoke without any rhyme or reason. The indignant demon was taken aback by his words and he stopped. "What did you say?" "Don't use my mistake to punish yourself." Li Yunxin's image looked into his eyes. You know in your heart that you really want to trust me again. What I did was to live, just like you do today. But I didn't have a choice in the past. Now I want to be a good person. The pupils of the ninth young master shrank into a thin line in anger. You're talking nonsense again. Are you trying to be mysterious again? This young master won't listen. He didn't listen to her, and he didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. He saw Li Yunxin looking at him sincerely. I know what you're thinking. No one in the world understands you better than me. Although we haven't known each other for long, I also know that you're a rare demon with a true temperament. If you didn't want to trust me, why would you ask me for help in the Golden Palace? You're like this now because you haven't realized what you're thinking. Let me tell you, ninth young master. In fact, now you're more willing to believe that I really want to save you, and that I didn't lie to you. But when you think this way, it reminds you of the times when I lied to you. So you've been holding a grudge in your heart and you've been wanting to vent your anger. But now you're seriously injured and I've restrained you. I'm on Mount Yunshan so you can't hurt me. Since that's the case, you have to find a way to hurt me. Since you can't project your resentment outwards, you project it on yourself. You're thinking that I want to save you and I'm worried about you. Since that's the case, you'd rather give up your life than let me do what I want. You want me to regret lying to you and losing your trust. Even if it's just a little bit of regret, it's good enough, isn't it? The ninth young master opened his eyes wide. What nonsense are you talking about? But Li Yunxin wasn't interrupted by him. He continued to say, you're just like those children in the secular world. You're beaten by your parents. You hang yourself, jump into the water and jump off a building. In fact, it's all because of the anger and resentment in your heart. What can you do to your parents? So you project your anger on yourself and it becomes self-harming and self-deprecating. Ninth young master. Li Yunxin paused and continued, when we were in the city of Wei, you also possessed this body and said goodbye to me generously. You told me not to disgrace the name of the ninth dragon. At that time you were still sane. I thought we could forget about it. But then I saw you being imprisoned in the Golden Palace. Even if I have a heart of stone, I couldn't bear it. Now, everyone in the world knows that the ninth dragon is a peerless demon. I think I didn't disgrace your name. Because of that, I don't want to have any regrets in my heart. You gave me this demon body. I also want to give you a body to make up for what I owe you. So, the ninth young master, don't punish yourself because of the mistakes I made to you in the past. At least you should live a happier life than our second brother. After saying these words, he became silent and only looked at the demon in front of him. And the demon was also silent. Its lips moved but it couldn't say a word for a long time. At this time, a series of bright flashes suddenly burst from the direction of Guan Yuan's crypt. The ninth young master fled from the crypt in a panic, but the skeletons didn't change their direction. Looking at the current situation, it seemed that they were fighting with a powerful figure. But these two skeletons could prevent spells and supernatural powers. Presumably, the so-called powerful figure would also have a headache. The flashes and the roar broke the short silence between the two. The ninth young master groaned angrily. After 2 breaths he said, "What you said is beautiful. But didn't you also want me to give you the Jade Scroll of Enlightenment?" Li Yunxin nodded immediately, yes. I did it for the Jade Scroll." The ninth young master snorted again, "Then we are just taking what we need. There is no friendship between us. Let me tell you, you should know that the dragon's soul is immortal. If you do something this time. Now the 9 sons of the dragon are all here. Even if I have to risk losing my consciousness, I will definitely take revenge." Li Yunxin sighed softly, "Of course. As long as you are happy." The ninth young master was silent for a while. Then he suddenly sighed and said in a very bleak tone, "Forget it. You are proud of yourself now. You even dare to plot against my first and second brother. What can I threaten you with? I can only blame myself." Li Yunxin. Now he was suddenly generous, suddenly resentful, and suddenly depressed. He really did look like a soul that had slightly lost its mind. At this moment, he was sighing as if he had resigned to his fate. "What does the body you prepared for me look like?" Li Yunxin smiled. "It is how the ninth young master used to look like. When I was in the place of the outer fringe, I once drew a body for my demon general. It seemed to be very useful. Now that my realm is higher, maybe I can draw a body for the ninth young master in the state of truth." The ninth young master was stunned. He widened his eyes. "The state of truth? What realm are you in now?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while. He said calmly, "The peak of the state of truth. Maybe I can enter the mystic realm." After listening to his words, the ninth young master opened his mouth. He did not say anything for a long time. In the end he sighed again. All right, all right, all right. The first time I saw you it was a thunderstorm night in spring. So, it is only mid-autumn now. But you are about to enter the mystic realm. Li Yunxin did not say anything. The ninth young master sighed with a mixture of sadness and joy. He said, higher. Higher than you. Li Yunxin was slightly stunned. He finally understood what he was talking about. He smiled, all right. Your eyes must be sharp. Li Yunxin smiled again. He glanced at the jade script of illumination in his hand. The ninth young master's appearance is the most beautiful I have ever seen. It is better not to change it too much. The ninth young master snorted softly. You are speaking the truth. Then forget it. This jade script of illumination, how do I give it to you? Li Yunxin's expression became serious. I am in Mount Yun now. I can't split myself out. I only need this jade script. You go to Mount Yun from here. When you reach the foot of the mountain, put this thing on the ground. I will try this formation. Let me see if I can control the nearby aura to cast a magical power to draw it in. The ninth young master frowned. Control the aura to cast a magical power? I will try, Li Yunxin said. When your body is ready, I will tell you what to do. The ninth young master sighed slightly. All right. After saying this he rolled up and rushed to Mount Yun. Li Yunxin's virtual shadow talked to the ninth young master at ease. But he himself was not at ease at all. It should be said that since he escaped from the county jail of Qinghe County, he was at his wits' end. He had discovered that the wall of the secret chamber where the cocoon was placed in the floating mountain was actually engraved with the spiritual chi map of this world. If it was damaged, the small Mount Yun outside the floating mountain would faithfully reflect the damage. It was as if the entire small Mount Yun was a projection of that secret chamber. Then he discovered that the density of the spiritual chi in the land of the small Mount Yun was also different, which coincided with the spiritual chi map on the wall of the secret chamber. This seemed to mean that the entire real world was like a projection of this small Mount Yun. He did not know what the people who built this secret chamber in Mount Yun were thinking, and what was the mystery behind this arrangement. The real world, the small Mount Yun, and the secret chamber were like 3 layers of matrices. Each layer could exert influence on the wider world outside. If this thing was really built by the Celestials, they probably only needed to be in this small Mount Yun and change the topography of this place, and they would be able to influence the wider world outside. This was very much like a method of painting that had been cultivated to a very high level, absorbing the spiritual chi between heaven and earth into the painting. Once the painting was completed and the brush was drawn on the scroll, it would cause a great change in heaven and earth. The difference was that this small Mount Yun now affected the whole world. This was indeed not something that could be done by human power. But no matter what, it was impossible for him to figure out these secrets alone in such a short period of time. What he knew at the moment was something else. Perhaps someone was also afraid of the power of this thing, and thus changed the topography of this small Mount Yun. With rivers, undulating hills and dense forests, it was covered up. If Li Yunxin had not been brought into the secret chamber where the cocoon was placed by Gong Di and seen the spiritual chi map on the wall, he would not have noticed the strangeness of this small Mount Yun. Thus, what he did was to control the topography and layout of this small Mount Yun to change the chi movement on the vast land outside the Mount Yun. The entire small Mount Yun was hundreds of miles long and wide, and was comparable to a small prefecture in this world. If he still had his divine sense, it would not be difficult for him to move mountains and fill rivers in this hundreds of miles long and wide. Now that he was at the peak of the true state, it would only be slightly difficult for him to move tens of thousands of tons of soil into the sky. However, most of the divine sense was restricted in this small Mount Yun. Even if he could summon the little figures that Qining had left on the stone wall to help him, it would still be like manual labor in the secular world, only much stronger. The only thing to be thankful for was that he did not memorize the spiritual chi map on the wall of the secret chamber. He only glanced at it unintentionally. Then he hypnotized himself to go back in time, but the impression he left after he woke up was limited. It was limited to the memory of the vicinity of the Guanyuan crypt in the Mount Yun. But in fact, it was enough. For example, he was standing on a pile of soil. When he first entered the small Mount Yun, the wandering soul disguised as Su Yusong led him through the dense forest at the foot of the floating mountain until they reached a natural treehouse in the forest. Then he stayed in the treehouse for several days. Now he was standing in the place where the treehouse used to be. However, the big tree had long been cut down by hundreds of little figures made of lines, and the ground was dug several feet deep, revealing its original appearance. The ground was made of an unknown hard metal. The shapes of mountains and rivers were etched on it. Among the etches, there was a mercury-like liquid flowing black and white, which seemed to symbolize the yin and yang in the world. The small Mount Yun, which was hundreds of miles in length and width, was a miniature version of the entire Midland. And this black and white flowing gold simulated the real flow of the natural powers in the real world. It was not hard to imagine how dense and fine the lines of mountains and rivers were etched on it. As he had expected, mountains and rivers affected each other, plants affected each other, and villages and towns affected each other. It was an extremely complex and integrated system. Now, although he had an impression of the spiritual chi map in the secret chamber, if he really wanted to correspond to these dense lines and those black and white flowing gold, the difficulty could not be described with the phrase, as difficult as climbing up to the sky. He stood high on the mound, his body stained with sand, and even a few fallen leaves on his hair bun. But he didn't notice these at all. He just frowned and stared at the metal ground under the mound, which had been excavated by those little figures. In terms of size, this piece of ground was only 2 steps horizontally and 2 steps vertically. But in such a small space, it contained half of the Manwan Mountain, half of the Yezhong Plain, and the entire sky-reaching swamp. Before, the Zither Master had refined all the dead souls on this battlefield according to the magic formation left by Wanderer White. The flow of the natural powers in the real world was clearly shown on this metal ground. When the natural powers changed, the black and white flowing gold changed as well. He was standing on this mound like a god looking down at the earth, and clearly saw the magic formation controlled by the Zither Master. Then, when the refined spirit creature power gathered into the Zither Master's body, he moved the 2-colored flowing gold on the ground. Then, as if a god had moved the mountains and the earth in the real world, the natural powers of the whole battlefield were changed in an instant. The spirit creature power that should have flowed into the Zither Master's body was suddenly changed and gathered in the Cloud Mountain. The great demon and young dragon master, who were at the peak of the profound realm, were immediately seriously injured. Emperor Li's palm hit them and they lost consciousness. And the aurora in the sky that the Zither Master had seen before, was the strange phenomenon that was caused in the real world by Li Yunxin when he reversed the natural powers in the Cloud Mountain. After that, he led the 2 skeletons to the Guanyuan cave in the Manwan Mountain, and also used the same method to directly change the natural powers outside the Cloud Mountain. Logically speaking, since he knew such a heaven-defying method, he should be invincible in the world, and have the power to steal the sky and change the sun with just a wave of his hand. Perhaps even the gods would not be able to do so. If he kept hiding in the little Cloud Mountain, dug up the entire ground and spent a year and a half to study it carefully, changing the chi activity of every corner of the world into the one he liked and designed, by then all the chi of the world would be under his control. What difference would there be between him and a god? But unfortunately, there had never been such an easy thing in the world. After Li Yunxin destroyed the Zither Master's formation, seriously injured him with spirit creature power, and led the 2 skeletons to the Guanyuan cave, he realized that this thing was not supposed to be used in this way. It was not like what he was doing, using external force to forcibly reverse the black and 2-colored liquid gold to achieve his goal. His method was extremely simple and crude, directly blocking the path of the liquid gold between the carvings with his fingers, or scooping it up and filling it somewhere else. By doing so, the natural powers of the world outside the Cloud Mountain were indeed temporarily changed. But in less than a dozen breaths, the liquid gold would return to its original position, and he would have to hurriedly adjust it again. Therefore he knew that there must be some secret method, some correct method that could permanently change the flow of the liquid gold, and make the natural powers of the world produce a permanent change. As soon as this thought came to his mind, he also remembered another thing. The jade slip of enlightenment. When he was young, he listened to Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu preach to him. At that time, the 2 did not teach him any profound Taoist techniques, but they made his foundation extremely solid. They were probably thinking about how long it would take, and whether they wanted him to step into the world of cultivation or not. But later the 2 died and he no longer had any teachers. Just like a student, in elementary school his foundation was extremely solid. But once he graduated he dropped out of school, and when he went to a more advanced field he had to learn everything by himself. Therefore at first, it was very fast for him to learn some basic techniques from the jade slip of enlightenment left by Qin Zhao. However, as his realm gradually increased and he reached a high level of cultivation, the drawback of his lack of systematic training was revealed. When he looked at the contents of the jade slip, there were many things that he did not understand. When Qin Zhao casually said that it was easy to obtain, he would frown and ponder for a long time, but he could not understand it. It was not that he was stupid, but he had no clue at all. But even so, he often took out the jade slip and looked at it lazily when he was free. It seemed that after looking at it, he had an impression of some of the things in it. In the few words that Qin Zhao recorded in the jade slip, there would occasionally be words like, black and white pure gold qi, and so close heaven and earth revolves. These words, Li Yunxin could tell at a glance, did not sound like her. And she must have heard it from somewhere, and she did not seem to know much about it, so she casually recorded it. The reason why he still had an impression of it was that Qin Zhao rarely used this kind of tone that only belonged to this world, this era, to record things in such a genteel manner. Until now he saw this black and white metal that flowed like water. And then he saw this iron plate that etched the layout of the entire world's spiritual power. Wasn't this the black and white pure gold qi, and so close heaven and earth revolves, that Qin Zhao occasionally mentioned in the jade slip of enlightenment? Qin Zhao must have heard of this thing before, but he did not know if she knew that it was in Shaoyin Mountain. And did Su Yusong and Zhuo Muzhou want the jade slip of enlightenment for this? Did the two of them know about this huge secret in Shaoyin Mountain? Did the saints of the past know? If they did not know, then Grandmaster D of the Freemasonry? Judging by his appearance, he should have entered and exited the secret room in the floating mountain where the cocoon was placed several times. Did they know? And where were they hiding? Did the elders know about what he was doing now? He had many questions in his heart, as well as a lot of worries and uneasiness. If it was someone else, he had just met the Freemasonry elders on the floating mountain and was almost killed. By now he would probably be scared shitless and leave this place. But he was so bold. Not only did he not leave, but he also started a large-scale construction on Shaoyin Mountain, as if he wanted to show that group of people. But until now, no one else had appeared on Shaoyin Mountain. This seemed to mean that the Freemasonry elders were not hiding on Shaoyin Mountain? But he could not figure this out at the moment. There were too many secrets on Shaoyin Mountain. Even its true master seemed to be unable to see the whole picture. All he could do was retrieve the jade slip of enlightenment as soon as possible. If he could find some trick in the jade slip, perhaps he would have a greater harvest today. If not, after he took care of the matters here, it was time for him to escape to the east. But it would be escape. It would not be like before where it would be escape. After these many thoughts went through his mind, Li Yunxin jumped off the pile of dirt. Previously he had used the black and white flowing gold here to set up a formation, called the restriction outside Shaoyin Mountain to cover the entire battlefield, and made his image appear 100 miles away. Now he was going to do something else. It was not a small trick like controlling qi to cast spells and storing the jade slip of enlightenment on Shaoyin Mountain. Instead he was going to use the sweet fruits that Dragon Sun and the Wandering Souls had worked so hard to obtain, for himself. Chapter 543. So he landed on the ground and walked to the front of the formation in 2 steps. He was stepping on the metal plate with flowing gold rotating under his feet. This made even a person like him feel a strange sense of pleasure in his heart. The patterns carved on the board and the golden qi flowing in the patterns represented the whole world. Although he didn't use spiritual power and just stepped on it normally wouldn't cause any interference to these things. But this wasn't some random topographic map that was placed in the study of those secular emperors to look at and fantasize about. This was something that could really affect the whole world, and now it seemed that the whole world was under his feet. Fortunately, although people said that he was a demon and some said that he was cruel and crazy, he wasn't a lunatic like the Wandering Souls. What kind of people were the scariest when they went crazy? In short, it wouldn't be someone like him. People like him had a lot of tricks up their sleeves and thought a lot. When they really went crazy, they couldn't compare to existences like those Wandering Souls and ghost cultivators. Their obsession was the root of their existence in the world. For the sake of a paranoid idea, letting the whole world die with them might be as natural as eating and drinking. If those guys knew this secret and saw this thing, even if they could only use spiritual aura to temporarily change the aura in some places, it was hard to imagine what those guys would do. For example, Su Yusong, who was jumping up and down outside the cloud mountain after he had diverted the qi of the earth, looked like he was ready to die with his son. However, Li Yunxin wasn't cruel. She wouldn't give him this chance. It was also because of this that he changed his previous plan. He wanted to kill Su Yusong with his own hands. In the end, Red Lady did it for him. However, according to his personality, he should have been happy to beat a drowning dog. He should have stood in front of Su Yusong and told him his plan one by one. Then he should have returned everything that the Wandering Soul had said to him in the past, so that he could vent his anger. What he hated the most was to wear luxurious clothes in the night. If it was the kind of person who killed his sworn enemy without him knowing who it was, that was enough to drive people crazy. After doing something beautiful, he must listen to others' praise, look at others' surprise, and see others' dumbfounded expressions of, "I never thought of that." Therefore he was a little disheartened at this time. Actually, what he needed to do next was to take over the soul-refining formation that Wanderer Bai had left behind in the Guanyuan cave. Since the Zither lady had activated the formation, she could naturally destroy it as well. Because of this, he waited patiently and heavily injured Zither monarch at the critical moment. Now that he saw his big brother in the hands of Emperor Li, he was really happy. But he still remembered when his big brother and second brother's image came to Little Cloud Mountain. The two of them saw that he was in dire straits and was about to die, but they stood there chatting and joking with Su Yusong and Zhuomuja. Even if one of them played the good cop and the bad cop, so what? In the end, they all wanted to obtain his secrets before he died. They were not even willing to be hypocrites anymore. Up until now. His big brother and second brother had fared better. Zither monarch was originally injured. Coupled with the attack that Li Yunxin had given him by mobilizing the qi of heaven and earth, his injuries could be said to be beyond repair. It would be difficult for him to recover in a short period of time. In fact, this was one of the reasons why high-level cultivators and demons did not easily make a move in the past. One must know that this was not some game from Li Yunxin's previous world. If you were injured, take some medicine and you will immediately recover. Here, it was like the people in the secular world. It was easy to say that it would take 100 days to recover from an injury. In this world, if an ordinary person really injured their muscles and bones, they would probably become disabled. But demons and cultivators, especially those who had reached the realm of Zither Lady in hatred, had the power to move mountains and fill the seas. If they were not careful, they would be seriously injured and their realm would be damaged. They would need a lot of demon power and spiritual power to make up for it. But there was no such thing as cultivating for hundreds of years to reach this realm, or recovering from a serious injury in a few days. It was like picking a fruit from a tree and having to grow another year to get it back. The reason why Zither Lady in hatred dared to do these things was probably because Zither Lady was confident. She believed that with his strength at the peak of the profound realm and as a demon of the dragons, it would be difficult for anyone to really hurt him. As for hatred, he had long planned to refine the souls of the dead. He was not afraid of being injured. As long as he did not die, the demon power refined from the souls of hundreds of thousands of cultivators and demons could be quickly replenished. The two's wishful thinking was very good. And indeed they were not injured by other cultivators, but by two skeletons. That evil king could be said to have harmed these two, but it was not known whether it was intentional or not. Now Zither Lady was in the hands of Emperor Li and hatred was bound by his iron chain. That iron chain was not an ordinary object. Once bound, there was no way to break free. Because it did not bind the body but the soul, it trapped the soul that was still in the body, so how could the body move? But with hatred's cultivation, it was more difficult than ascending to heaven to tie him up when he was alive and kicking. But tonight, with the help of the ninth young master, it did not take much effort at all. Now, the four people who had seen his miserable appearance in the study and talked cheerfully and wittily all ended up in a miserable state. Half of it was his plan, and the other half was a coincidence. And the jade slip of enlightenment was now sent to him by the ninth young master. The so-called protagonist's fate and 10 lives worth of merit were probably just like this. But Li Yunxin still did not have much energy. It was like, in his previous world, when someone saw a beautiful scene, their camera ran out of battery. He stopped, stooped down and took a careful look at the ground. From this thing he could not see outside images. Everything he saw was deduced from the black and white flowing gold. For example, if the earth chi in a certain place suddenly moved, it was not the majestic aura of natural circulation, but a lot of small streams that were intertwined and disturbed in a regular pattern. Then, it was obvious that someone with high cultivation was fighting there. Therefore, he was able to slightly adjust the qi in that place. After extremely complicated calculations and considerations, he considered both the flow of qi on the ground itself and the influence brought about by people in that place. Then he asked himself to show his doppelganger there and adjust the qi. Otherwise, if he were to randomly appear in this vast area of 1,000 miles, he might not even bump into a single living person in a day. But with this glance he saw something else. It seemed that someone was fighting with the two skeletons. He knew that there were many demons hiding in the Manwan mountain. Moreover, those that were able to survive the rain of fire that even he felt lingering fear in his heart weren't nobodies, and most of them were greater demon kings from all over the world. These people were targeted by the skeletons, so they had to fight back. The black and white molten gold were divided into countless tiny whirlpools, and each whirlpool represented a human or a demon. There were hundreds of them and they were fighting against the two skeletons. These should be most of the surviving spirit creature kings in this place. Or in other words, most of the surviving spirit creature kings in the Midland. Li Yunxin didn't care about these spirit creature kings, who were not friends with him. But the one who caught his attention was another one who was especially powerful as a peak-level profound realm being. Earlier, when those spirit creatures were fighting outside, he stayed in here and watched. Therefore he knew that although the dragons were powerful, only two of them were the most powerful. One was Long Deqin Master and the other was his third sister, the evil spirit. That day at the front lines the evil lord said some heartwarming words to him. But how could a man like him be fooled by a few words? Everyone could say beautiful words and he himself was a master of it. Words didn't mean anything and he had to see how things would turn out. Therefore he saw what his third sister, the evil spirit, was doing. She seemed to be protecting someone. Li Yunxin was also familiar with that sense of power. Bai Yunxin, the adopted daughter of the Golden Rock King, had returned to the profound realm because of the feather cloak. Somehow the evil spirit took a liking to her. It was easy to see that she was protecting her in every way. The two skeletons had sealed most of the spirit creature's powers. Therefore they fought like mortals in the mortal world and had to rely on their fists and weapons. But those skeletons were like strong men, and those spirit creature kings were like ants on the ground. These ants were stronger than real ants. At least their bodies were strong, they were agile, and they were relatively intelligent. Their bodies were not proportionate to the skeletons, but as the saying goes, ants can bite an elephant to death. They could still fight for a while. But it was only a while. The surrounding area was sealed by the formation outside Yunshan by Li Yunxin. It was very easy for him to hide in the turtle shell of Yunshan and watch a group of trapped beasts being swallowed by the skeletons one by one. It was a pity that Bai Yunxin had a bad life. Red Lady escaped far away after she left Yunshan. She didn't manage to escape in time and was left behind. But no matter what surprised him was the evil spirit's action of protecting. Guqinjun would not do such a thing. His second brother, the ninth young master, would not do such a thing either. But Red Lady would do it and so would Bai Yunxin. And there was the ninth young master. What he said to Long Jiu in the video earlier was the truth. Now he knew that the ninth young master was a very simple demon. If it was him he would also do such a thing. Now that he was on Yunshan he had witnessed so many deaths. Even if one's heart was as hard as iron, it would still be touched. If this kind of thing was told as a story to others, the words hundreds of thousands of lives would only be left in his mind. However, seeing those people and demons dying in front of his eyes, it was another kind of shock. The shock did not come from anything else. It came from above. Although he knew that the so-called celestial beings in this world might not be the gods in the legends of the secular world. But in the unseen world he would always be afraid of some retribution for killing too much. This retribution might not come from a person or a group but from fate? This thought. Li Yunxin blinked her eyes and sucked in a breath of cold air as the thought flashed through her mind. Such a thought actually came from him. Even if one's heart was as hard as iron, it would still be touched. The prerequisite for this kind of thing was to have a heart. But he didn't know when he had slowly developed such a heart, to feel a little uneasy about these deaths, instead of feeling that he should feel uneasy. Chapter 544. It probably started from that night. That night, he ran back to Ziwei Palace from Hongling in Country of Yu. He told Lu Gongzan that he might have been set up. Lu Gongzan said he was overthinking but he believed it must be true. Someone used a long and big conspiracy to break the Taishang state he was born in. Then he was attacked by the people of Xianmen. This topic was interrupted. At this moment, when he should have been proud of his success, he suddenly thought of this. Because he realized that if he was heartless before, he was heartless now. The first one was heartless. He knew what other people felt and what he should do to cater to other people's feelings. But on the inside, he felt that his heart was as elusive as the clouds high in the sky, and difficult to fathom. In this life, Li Chunfeng gave him the name Li Yunxin, which was a lucky hit. He also knew that he was heartless in his previous life because of a physiological disease. In this life, his body became a normal person, but he knew that there was a soul in this world. So he didn't know whether he was heartless in his previous life because of his body or because he had a heartless soul. Then he met many people and things. Sometimes he would have a situation like, why do I have such a strange feeling? But he wasn't sure whether he had feelings or not. The last ruthless point was love. For example, now. So many monster kings were trapped in the prohibition spell and couldn't get out. The two skeletons were fighting with them and seemed to have the upper hand. He stripped part of the wacken from them and let them fight with the rest, but there was no risk of losing control. In this situation, Li Yunxin, who had just entered the human world, would probably watch them all die. He had an agreement with Shinryu that night. In fact, he could even be considered a member of the True Dragon. Maybe it was because of this that Guqin Jun and Lord Tong Tian couldn't tolerate him. In the end, demons were hard to tame. Now that there were so many Long Sun and Great Demon Kings here, there was no harm in killing them all. However, he still felt that something was wrong. In his previous life, when he saw a few ants crawling in front of him, he would raise his hand and crush them to death one by one, or leave the second and third in the middle. In fact, he did not feel any pleasure from crushing ants to death, nor did he have any special hobbies, nor did he have any special reason. It was just that. It's like you accidentally swinging your hand when you're walking. When I did this, it was nothing. There was no purpose. There is no difference between crushing an ant or killing a dog or a man, and moving a table or taking a couple of steps in the same place. A moment ago they were talking and laughing with you, and the next moment they killed you. In the eyes of such people, there was no contradiction between talking and killing. Or rather, there was no relationship at all. At that time, he would never have felt the way he did now. He felt that he was heartless. In the eyes of many, he was extremely cold and heartless. But being heartless in this world meant that people lacked certain emotions, but others would still exist. So now he did not know if he also had some emotions. Like a solid dam that was slowly leaking water, it would probably bring a terrible result one day. This was really damn it. Before this he took a deep breath and now he sighed. Of course, he would not do that kind of stupid thing. Knowing that he was slowly beginning to have feelings, he was afraid and felt that this thing should not happen, so he forced himself to believe that he was still heartless, and insisted on walking on a certain path. If he was such an awkward and unpleasant person, he would probably have died dozens of times already. He was Li Yunxin. He always knew how to sail according to the wind, and how to adapt to the situation. Since he was sure of this, he knew that heartless people had their own way of living, and people with feelings also had their own way of living. When he was heartless, he could kill all these people and give himself a peaceful world. But now, if he really had some feelings, it would be troublesome if he forced himself to kill them. He would feel uncomfortable in his heart. Maybe in the future this feeling of discomfort would become stronger. Cultivation was about a subtle state of mind, unless he planned to stop practicing painting and only be a demon. Otherwise, it would be very stupid to find trouble for himself. How could he do such a thing? Since that was the case, there was another way. Li Yunxin sighed. Alas. You guys are lucky. I am a soft-hearted person now. Then he suddenly stretched out two fingers, channeled his spiritual power, and pointed at the black and white flowing gold. He had been behind the scenes for so long, now was the time to show off his new clothes. The deduction Li Yunxin made based on the black and white flowing gold was very close to the truth. Now, there were indeed hundreds of great demons fighting with the two skeletons. But it was not what he guessed. The scattered demon kings hiding in the mountains had formed a motley crew. These great fiendish demons were, in fact, subordinates. The nine-dragon sun claimed to rule over 70% of the world's waters. Although it was just a name, for example, the nine dragon suns could only enjoy the incense in a short stretch of Wei River. The actual area of control was still very large. Especially for super great demons like Zither Master and Evil Lord, the area under their control would only be more, not less. Just like what Li Yunxin saw in Hatred's Golden Palace, there were many great demons under the Evil Lord's command. But at least among the 9 sons of the dragons, the Evil Lord's character might be considered relatively benevolent. She vaguely knew that Zither Master and Hatred were plotting something, so she didn't let those great demons advance too far. But she couldn't say it before the battle. The few dragon sun had the intention to kill all of them and enjoy their souls. As a result, there were always some arrogant great demons who had a grudge against the celestial sect of wonders who bravely advanced on the array. In the end, there weren't many great demon kings left under her command. But it was still much better than others. Before the 2 skeletons went straight to Manwan Mountain, she and Bai Yunxin both sensed that there were great demons fighting in the mountains. Then she realized that the surging aura was somewhat familiar. The reason why she only felt it was familiar was that a great demon like Zither Master rarely fought. The last time she saw him fight was almost a few hundred years ago. While she was hesitating, she found that Zither Master's aura suddenly weakened to the point of almost non-existence. At this moment, she knew that one of the 2 people fighting just now was Zither Master. Both of them had high cultivation levels. no lower than the Xianmen realm. But in the blink of an eye, one of them was defeated by the other. Who else could do this except for Zither Master and herself? But when she thought of this, she also felt the sudden change of aura between heaven and earth. This sudden change of aura also affected her. But after all, her cultivation level was extremely high and she didn't use Taoist spells like the cultivators of Xianmen. Therefore, he still had time to think about other things. If it was Zither Master who fought with someone and defeated that person, then who would be so daring to attack the Dragon Prince at this time? If the one who was defeated was Zither Master, then who had such magical power? This thought turned in her mind and she wanted to find out. She had asked Zither Master to control the two skeletons. But when the aura between heaven and earth changed, the bodies of the two skeletons also began to peel off. All these situations were linked together, so it was difficult to make a clear judgment. Who would have thought that things would change in the future beyond her comprehension? The two skeletons began to run in all directions and began to attack the nearby cultivators as if they were in hot pursuit. It was as if they had lost their demonic powers and wanted to make up for it with the bodies of others. But when the skeletons went to the thousands of cultivators, Evil Master thought that Zither Master wanted to use the hands of the two monsters to completely annihilate the enemy. Then, the skeletons pounced on them. The fierce and evil aura almost locked onto all the great demons in the mountain, including her. Only then did she realize that things were not good. Zither Master and Hatred said that the two things lost control after they were awakened. By now, Zither Master should have tried to control them, but it seemed to be even more terrifying. Maybe Zither Master and the others also fell into a trap. Once this thought came to her mind, she immediately took Bai Yunshin and tried to leave Manwan Mountain. Then she found that they seemed to be trapped by someone. What a sinister and vicious method. They wanted to trap them to death. Chapter 545. After all, she had some insider information. However, the Demon Kings did not know anything. They were lucky enough to survive the terrifying battlefield and should have left immediately. However, the evil lord had treated them well and many of them had the thought of taking advantage of the situation. Hence, they lingered in the mountains and decided to observe the situation. Although the two skeletons looked terrifying, it had been mentioned before, the real body of the great Demon King was 1,000 feet tall, and the size of the skeletons was similar. They did not know the secret history of the true demon or the ancient demon. They only felt that the two monsters were strange, but they did not feel much danger. Hence, when the skeletons charged over, they realized that things were not good. They originally had the thought of, if you mess with me, I will show my real body and tear you apart. However, when they were enveloped by the skeletons' restrictions, they realized that they could not show their real bodies. Furthermore, the skeletons' techniques were very powerful. They seemed to be big and useless, slow and stupid. However, in reality they could use the supernatural powers of Xianmen. As soon as the demons realized that their supernatural powers were forbidden, they did not have the thought of escaping. Instead, they planned to gather their strength and break the bones of these two idiots one by one. These monsters were big, but they only had two hands after all. With hundreds of demons charging at them, they would be able to defeat them easily. Unexpectedly, the moment they met, a lot of golden energy was released from the skeletons. In the blink of an eye, the golden energy turned into hundreds and thousands of little swordsmen. Although these swordsmen were called little, it was relative to the skeletons. In reality, each of them was the size of a real person. The moment they appeared, they chanted incantations. Their hands shone brightly and released countless flying swords. The golden flying swords were like a downpour. There was no way to avoid it as it shot towards the bodies of the demons. If Li Yunxin or any other Xianmen cultivators were here, they would know that this was one of the supernatural powers of Kenzo. It was called Xuanye Golden Light Technique. When Qing Liangji was fighting with Li Yunxin in the city of Wei, he used this technique. Just like that, 5 or 6 great demons were killed. Fortunately, although the light swords were like a storm, they were not very powerful. If he dodged to the left and to the right, or if he didn't hit a vital part of the body, he would be able to scatter those young swordsmen. However, as soon as this idea was born, a fearless monster king really did it. The two huge skeletons suddenly bent their bodies, and 2 ferocious-looking bony arms suddenly smashed down like a falling mountain. This strength was terrifying and so was its speed. For a moment, strong winds howled in the sky, and sand and stones flew about on the ground. It was as if the sky had collapsed. However, the demons were still able to dodge such a fierce attack. However, countless large pythons suddenly appeared in the midst of the gale. The scales of these pythons were like the feathers of a golden pheasant, colorful and gorgeous. However, there was a row of sharp barbs on its back, and each of the barbs was soaked in a green mucus. One look and anyone could tell that it was a highly poisonous substance. Just like those swords of light, they rained down on his head again. The light sword was easy to dodge. Even if one was hit, it would just pass through the body. However, once the pythons touched a person, they would immediately coil around the person and use the poisonous barbs on their back to stab them. Although the demons were very resistant to poison, they would always feel numb and confused. If they let their guard down, they would be thrown to the ground by the strong wind caused by the skeletons. If they could not dodge in time, they would be smashed into meat paste by the bony arms. Now, they knew how terrifying skeletons were. Not only were their bodies strong, but they also knew how to use supernatural powers. In this world, they were either like the demons with strong bodies, or like the cultivators with mysterious Taoist powers. Now that these two big fellows had come, they would take advantage of both. Wouldn't they be hooligans? After 2 consecutive attacks, the demons finally had the intention to retreat. They originally wanted to fight, but not just for themselves. The evil lord and Bai Yunshin were standing on a small hill not far away watching the battle. Many of the demons here were demon generals under the evil lord. Since they saw their lord watching the battle, they naturally had the responsibility to fight. However, they were not like the generals in the mortal world, who placed their lives on the shoulders of their lord. Before this, they fought bravely to show their loyalty. At this moment, they realized that this was a tough bone to chew. Who would want to fight with their lives? Naturally, it was best to retreat. Thus, some of the demon generals flashed and retreated from the battle. Standing in mid-air, they stepped on the rolling black clouds and cupped their fists towards the evil lord. They shouted, "Evil Lord, Your Highness. Us brothers have always been taken care of by Your Highness. Today we should fight to the death. However, Your Highness also knows that our brothers have already suffered heavy casualties by coming here. Now that we have encountered such a monster, it is not something we can easily subdue. Your Highness is kind and generous. Your Ladyship is kind and generous. She won't sit by and watch us hand over our lives here. We'll take our leave first. After we've recuperated, we'll come back to repay Your Ladyship's kindness." After saying this, their figures flashed again and they rode the black clouds away. The demon king who spoke was not a bystander. He was a demon king who transformed from a stool in a rich family's house to the north of Tiansha Cliff, where the evil Lord Chao Feng lived in a town called Shangliu. Now he had lived for 2,600 years. Usually he called himself Ancestor Tua Tua. He had some tricks up his sleeves and had some prestige among the demons. After he retreated, the rest of the demons did not want to fight anymore. They all apologized to the evil lord and turned to leave. Only about a dozen demon kings and demon generals were left to fight to the death. As they moved, they scolded those who left. How could they be worthy of the evil lord's benevolence? However, they did not fight anymore. They just kept moving around the 2 skeletons. At this moment, the 2 skeletons did not care about them. They were walking towards the evil lord. Among all the demons present, the evil lord had the highest cultivation and the strongest demonic power. To the skeletons now, she was like a delicious piece of meat. Only after swallowing her would they have the mood to look at the other demon kings. But this evil Lord Long San, who was wearing a black robe and silver armor, just stood on the hill solemnly, letting her robe flutter in the night wind. She did not stop or scold those who escaped. She also did not praise those who stayed. She did not seem to be afraid of the 2 skeletons that were walking towards her. She stared at them without even frowning. After about 3 breaths, she looked at the direction where the demons had escaped and said in a low voice, "Since he is not dead, and he has not shown himself, and such a thing has happened, tell me, is he the one behind all this?" Beside her was Bai Yunshin. This female demon had returned to the profound realm. Among the demons present, her cultivation was one of the highest. But now, there was a look of hesitation and fear on her face. This was not the expression that should appear on a demon's face, especially a proud female demon like her. But the reason for this was because Zither Jun's question was exactly what she was thinking. When she was in Mount Shaoyin, she knew that Li Yunshin was not dead. Not only was he not dead, but he was also searching for the legendary treasure that could control all the demons. After that, Red Madam also ran out of Mount Shaoyin. She knew that Li Yunshin was good at coaxing people. She thought that Li Xinyu should be happy, so she did not make things difficult for him. Then, so many changes occurred. The 2 skeletons that were supposed to listen to Long Da and Long Air were now attacking their own people. This vast area was also surrounded by an invisible barrier, and no one could get out. Could all these be done by Li Yunshin, who was currently on Yunshan? But this was not the main point. The main point was that Li Xinyu had run away. But now she stayed here. The two skeletons were also coming towards her. If Li Yunxin did all this, did he really not have the slightest affection for her, and only treated her as a stranger who could kill him at any time? When this thought came into her mind, it was the first time that she experienced some kind of strange emotion. But actually it wasn't something like love or hate. She had walked the world for 1,000 years. In the past 1,000 years, how could he not have met any interesting people? It was normal for her to meet interesting people and fall in love with them. Although she was a proud female demon, she would not be like those low-level demons who would not do something like marry a mortal. But she would do such elegant things as rowing on the lake, singing with the zither, reciting poems and drinking wine. But 1,000 years was really too long. During this year she would fall in love with a person and occasionally she would go to see him. This, occasionally, was measured in years or even decades, and the two of them would talk about romantic things and she would experience the affection and love of the world. But sadly this kind of affection and love did not last long. Because those men in the world were all fickle and heartless. She fell in love with him and he fell in love with her. After the two of them fell in love with each other, Bai Yunxin only went out to play for a few days, just a few years or decades, and when she came back to see those men they were always married and had children. When they saw her again they would say something like, "I thought you would never come back." This kind of person made her hate him. She turned all the love she had for him into hatred. She even killed his wife and children. Those she killed were all heartless people. So she had experienced the feeling of love. But one must know that a kind of feeling can also be slowly forgotten. Mortals' lives were short like the morning dew. After experiencing a kind of emotion, they died before they could forget it. So they shamelessly said things like forever and ever, and the seas run dry and the rocks decay. But they did not know, Bai Yunxin knew, that the feeling of love and the feeling of hate could actually be forgotten. As long as you lived long enough. Maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, she knew what love was. But after so many years she forgot what love was. So even when facing Li Yunxin now, she felt the feeling of love. Again, she did not feel it was strange. What made her feel strange was despair. This was a different kind of emotion that she had never experienced before. Because she knew what the demons in the world were like. Although mortals' hearts were fickle, they were still very soft. But the hearts of demons, if they had hearts, were hard and cold. She was a demon, so she understood demons the best. So when she wanted to find love, she never thought to find it among the demons who lived as long as her. She knew it was impossible. The world of demons and the world of Shenmen were cold and cruel, the real world. Here, love and affection were like dust and floating clouds that could be easily erased. Only those little people who thought they lived in the real world would spend a lot of time and energy on that kind of thing. But now she knew that Li Yunxin was also a demon. And when he was a human he was like a demon. Now that he had become a real demon, he must be a demon among demons. She knew this. She knew what the evil lord in her thought might be true. Li Yunxin really didn't care about her life or death. Furthermore, he had found a way to control the two skeletons to exterminate all the demons on Cloudy Mountain. She wouldn't be surprised at all. Because this was indeed something that demons would do. She felt hopeless. She had thought that she had finally found something in the demon that could only be found in a human being. But now she realized that it was just an illusion. Nothing had ever existed, she just forgot the feeling of love and lost her mind. But what was even more hopeless, she felt despair because of this. She felt like she had fallen into a bottomless quagmire. This was something she had never experienced before. This made her feel despair and fear. So she was silent for a long time. She let these feelings surge in her heart for a long time. Then she sighed softly in the night. Maybe. When she said this, she smelled the fishy smell in the night wind. The giant skeletons were about to reach this hill in about 10 steps. The night wind brought their breaths to her. It was a breath that made her shiver and numb. But the evil lord didn't seem surprised. She sighed softly, turned around and raised her voice. Do you know now? She wasn't talking to Bai Yunxin. Instead he was speaking to a group of demons who had returned. Patriarch Tua Tua led the demon kings to escape, but they encountered the same situation as the evil lord. This area was sealed. They couldn't escape for a while. So they could only come back to ask the evil lord what was going on. When they heard what the evil lord said, they were all stunned. Then they saw the big demon in the black robe and silver armor slowly straighten her body. She had been standing on the hill watching the battle and she was like a sharp sword. But the sword was hidden in the scabbard. Now the sharp sword was unsheathed. A strong aura emanated from her body. Her dark golden hair also glowed faintly with golden light. She looked straight at the two skeletons that were about to arrive. There was no fear in her eyes. Instead, she was no longer silent. Instead, she was full of fighting spirit. "I didn't leave. It's because I knew we couldn't leave. Someone wants to bury us here," she said in a low voice, "but I'm here. As long as you are willing to serve me, I will protect your lives. Today we don't know who will die." Chapter 546. As soon as she finished speaking, her body, which was standing solemnly, shook slightly. Then, the wide black robe suddenly began to flutter, making a loud sound. Usually, when demons and cultivators fought, their sleeves fluttered because their bodies were full of demonic power and spiritual power. When they fought, their robes fluttered because their bodies were full of demonic power and spiritual power. But at this time, the skeletons were getting closer and closer, and all her supernatural powers were restricted. The demonic power in her body could only flow and surge in her body, but it couldn't be released. However, it still appeared like this. The reason was that Long Sun, who was at the peak of the Shen realm, had an unimaginably strong body, which was close to the Grand Supreme realm. With only the pure strength of the body and filled with demonic power, what could this powerful person do? This was the step. Her body shook, and the air around her was stirred up, as if spiritual power was erupting. Her hair was originally tied up in a bun with two blades hanging down. There were no cosmetic decorations on her hair bun. Instead, there were a few slender gold and silver swords stuck in it. Now, as her aura rose, those small swords fell in the strong wind. Her long black hair suddenly fluttered, which made her look even more ferocious and majestic. At this moment, the two skeletons finally arrived. First, they crushed the two high hills in front of them, and then two ferocious giant feet came crashing down like mountains. They came very fast. It was so fast that the strong wind caused by the slight shake of the evil spirit's body was immediately dispersed by the wind pressure caused by the giant feet of the two skeletons. The grass, gravel, and sand on the ground began to disperse crazily, as if the logs and rocks that weighed dozens of kilograms were the tiniest dust. The evil spirit stood on the hill. Compared to the two skeletons, she was like a light and slender bird that was about to be trampled to death by a human. But at the moment when the giant feet were about to fall, the big demon suddenly shouted, "Go!" It was hard to tell whether the shout was directed at Bai Yunshin or the skeleton. With a backhand slap, Bai Yunshin was sent hundreds of feet away. Then, the hill and her figure were immediately covered by a huge mass of thick clouds and a loud noise. This was because she stomped on the ground, and like two skeletons she stomped on the hill and crushed it into real dust. It was as if a third giant had appeared on the ground. The evil lord's step caused the entire flatland to shake even more violently than when the skeletons ran. Just as the smoke and dust exploded under the night sky, a black shadow, as fast as a galloping horse or a meteor, struck the ankle of one of the skeletons that was standing on the ground. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before Bai Yunshin could land on the ground after being pushed away by Lin Sanju's palm force, Lin Sanju was already in the air. The demon kings under her heard her cold words, but before they could say anything else, the demon kings under her throne heard her words. However, the huge skeleton had already started to fall. The evil lord's attack, which was made with her peak-level physical strength of a big demon dragon, instantly shattered the skeleton's ankle and broke one of its legs. When the skeleton's bones were smashed, the sound was like the breaking of gold and the breaking of a heavenly pillar. The huge and scary monster let out a long and loud roar, as if it was in extreme pain. Its body started to fall and it tried to reach out one of its hands to support itself on the ground. At this moment, the evil lord had landed on another hill. She stood with her hands behind her back just like before. Amidst the black hair that danced wildly in the night wind, two dazzling golden pupils and a face so white that it was glowing could be seen. The skeletal hand was pressing down upon her. It looked as if she had delivered herself into the grasp of the gigantic monster. But in fact, it was indeed so. The evil lord opened his mouth again and shouted sternly, "Look carefully. What's there to be afraid of about this big but useless fool?" The skeleton was at a disadvantage. When the palm came down, she used her Taoist technique again. Layers of dazzling circular restrictive spells with numerous runes appeared in the middle of the palm. In the restrictive spells there were fire, wind, thunder, and fog. They intertwined and rushed towards the evil lord. However, she did not dodge or avoid it. Long Sanchao Feng waved her robe, and the silver armor on her body shone brightly, protecting her. With a loud bang, she shot up into the sky and crashed into the layers of restrictive spells in the skeleton's palm. Seeing this, the demons were shocked. The spiritual power in the restrictive spells was so strong that they could feel it even though they were so far away. The horrifying wave seemed to be able to collapse the sky and press down on half of the world, but the evil lord actually went up against it. In the blink of an eye, the sound of metal and stone breaking could be heard again. In the skeleton's palm, the dazzling light dimmed. The evil lord in the black robe and silver armor broke through the skeleton's palm and flew up into the sky. At this moment, even the muddle-headed skeleton seemed to know that this little person was very difficult to deal with. Its body completely lost its balance, and the other skeleton also reached out to grab her. Now that the evil lord's supernatural power was forbidden, she could not use the sky dance technique. She smashed the skeleton's left hand again, and the momentum of her flying up into the sky also weakened. Her body slowly fell from the sky, and the two skeletons reached out their hands again. They were about to grab her tightly in their palms. But at this moment, her body suddenly burst out with dazzling light. An indescribably sharp whistling sound reverberated through the entire area. Behind the evil spirit's back, a pair of huge, shining and colorful golden wings suddenly stretched out. Everyone was stunned by this scene. This meant that this wasn't a supernatural power, but a pair of wings that had truly grown out of her body. The golden wings spread out and flapped with all her might. She immediately turned into a dazzling golden meteor and flew towards the huge skull of the skeleton. The words "in the blink of an eye," or "in the blink of an eye," could no longer describe her speed. When she smashed the skeleton's ankle, the dust was still rising and spreading. When she smashed the skeleton's palm, the loud sound was still lingering, and now she hit the skull of the skeleton again. A series of roars, flames, thunderclouds, and dust exploded. These clouds, fog, and light formed a trajectory. The evil lord went in through the left eye socket of the skull and came out from the back of the skull. She continued to fly for hundreds of feet and then slowed down. From afar, it looked as though a huge spear had pierced through the skull of the skeleton, completely piercing through it. The huge skeleton suddenly quieted down. It was as if it was frozen in an instant, and the horrible aura on its body also disappeared. It paused in midair. Its body, which was trying to find its balance and grab the evil lord, froze. After a breath, it started to collapse and disintegrate. Its bones started to disintegrate piece by piece. Its bones collapsed, and before it fell to the ground, fine, spiderweb-like cracks appeared on its body. After that, the cracks expanded rapidly and broke the bones into tiny pieces. In an even shorter period of time, those tiny fragments turned into fragments and then into dust. After the skull was pierced through, the horrible skeleton completely turned into thick dust and dissipated in the strong wind before it fell to the ground. It only took a few breaths' time. But in fact, from the moment the evil lord flew up from the hill, flapped its wings, landed next to Bai Yunshin and stood on a small hill, it only took a few breaths' time. In the span of a few breaths, she destroyed a skeleton that caused the demons to tremble in fear with only 3 strikes. The other skeletons seemed to be stunned. But the monsters were also stunned. Bai Yunshin was also stunned. Whether it was her or the Monster Kings, this was the first time they had seen such power. Long Sun, who was at the peak of the mystic realm, could release such a horrible power with only the demonic power in his body. "My lord." Bai Yunshin opened her mouth, "You," but the evil lord interrupted her. She spat out 3 words in a low voice, "Hold me." Bai Yunshin blinked her eyes and then realized something. She immediately went to the evil lord's side and held her arm. She leaned against the evil lord's back in an intimate way. Then, he felt that this great demon, who had been insufferably arrogant and seemed to be able to destroy the heavens and the earth, was now trembling so hard under the black robe and silver armor that her body was as light as a feather. She retracted the wings behind her back. Her dark golden hair fell down again. The night wind was still blowing. But her hair seemed to be much heavier than normal hair. Now it was like a heavy brocade. Only a few strands of hair on the sides of her face were lifted. "What's there to be afraid of about such a stupid thing?" she said. Her voice was low and stern, and her breath was very steady. It sounded like he was full of energy. It seemed that killing a skeleton was extremely easy and did not consume any energy at all. But Bai Yunshin could feel that with every word she said, her body trembled more violently. It was as if every breath she exhaled and every word she uttered would take away a great deal of her strength and vitality, causing her to be unable to hold on any longer. "You are all monster kings and monster generals under the rule of my Tian Sha Cliff. Now, you also see the situation in the world. The mystic sects are declining, and the demons are greatly weakened. So many monster kings have fallen. Who is going to take away the former lands? She stared sternly at the demons standing in the forest. Their faces were full of fear and respect. Who is going to take away the territories of the mystic sects cultivators and the billions of people in the human world? If you leave and let these two stupid things destroy the human world and bring chaos to the world, I ask you, whose world will the chaos be? Will it still be the mystic sects' world? The demons were stupid. But even if there were some who weren't so stupid because of the environment they were in for a long time, they would be like frogs in a well. For example, in a chaotic world, an honest citizen would only think about how to save his life. A gangster who ran amok in a village might want to take over a village or a county. And only those who had seen the real world would have the idea of fighting for the world. For tens of thousands of years, the demons were suppressed by the mystic sects. They hid in the deep mountains and forests and became kings who didn't care about the world. Occasionally there were some monster kings who were really ambitious, but they also bravely advanced in the previous battles. They were all buried in that rain of fire. Therefore the remaining ones were not very ambitious. After hearing the Fiend Lord's words, she realized one thing. Now the mystic sects had been completely defeated. Many monster kings who used to run amok in the world had also fallen. These monster kings who could only be called kings in the Fiend Lord's fief, had become the number of unparalleled great monsters in the world. Now the world, was it not their world? Thinking about this, she heard the crane demon Bai Yunshin shout, "Idiot! Now that the saint of the mystic sects is dead, my godfather will return to the world soon. At that time, the two venerables in the world will belong to the demon race. If you want to be a monster king with a fief of 10,000 miles in the future, let me and the Fiend Lord see how brave and capable you are." If there are any more who run away, Bai Yunshin squinted her eyes and emitted a terrifying aura. After the Fiend Lord takes care of this one, he will naturally capture him and sacrifice him to the flag. This new world of fiendish demons will not tolerate any cowardly scoundrels. Although the demons didn't know why Bai Yunshin and the Fiend Lord were so close, they knew Bai Yunshin's identity. The Fiend Lord was Long's son, and Bai Yunshin was the Peng King's goddaughter. Both of them were great monsters with frightening backgrounds. Looking at how sweet they were, they knew that what she said was probably the Fiend Lord's words. In fact, the Peng King seemed to want to form an alliance with the Shinryu. At this thought, a demon with a long face and a sharp mouth jumped out bravely and shouted, "The Fiend Lord and Miss Bai are right. The Fiend Lord, just wait and see how we deal with this stupid thing." The monster kings looked at the person who spoke. It was a rat king. Bai Yunshin said that there was no cowards in the world. He didn't dare to hide at the back anymore. His body shook and he pounced forward. Just like that, in twos and threes, one after another, these hundreds of demons returned to the battle, and were entangled with the second skeleton. Although they couldn't ignore the forbidden spells and supernatural powers like the dragons, they had the will to fight and they were looking forward to the future. It was different from the last time. For a moment they all showed off their abilities and jumped up and down. For the time being they were evenly matched with the skeleton. At this point, the Fiend Lord heaved a sigh of relief and said in a low voice, "You leave first." Bai Yunshin was stunned. What? They can't defeat it. The Fiend Lord's face was gloomy. At least he could stand on his own. However, his body was still trembling. It was obvious that he had suffered some serious injuries or had used up a lot of his demonic power. If there are no other changes today, whether I can survive or not will depend on fate. There might be a turn for the better, but you leave first. That thing is very scary. Not long ago, the Fiend Lord easily killed a skeleton and the situation seemed to be looking good. Now that all the monster kings had been incited by her, she actually said such a thing. This made Bai Yunshin even more surprised. She looked at the skeleton and then at the Fiend Lord. That thing, however, the Fiend Lord turned to look at her. His eyes were solemn and calm. "I don't have much time left. I guess I won't live past tonight." If this is what Li Yunshin is doing and his goal is to catch all the demons in one fell swoop, I think he won't kill you even if you leave us. Now there should be other people trapped in this restriction. Old 4th, Old 5th, Old 6th, Old 7th and Old 8th should all be here. If Li Yunshin wants to kill them all, he won't have time to care about you. You said that he is a different kind of demon. I used to think so too. But now it seems that I'm wrong. I hope you're not wrong. This made Bai Yunshin dumbfounded. After 2 breaths' time she shouted, "You!" She quickly lowered her voice and held the Fiend Lord's hand. "Why can't I live past tonight?" The Fiend Lord paused and looked at Bai Yunshin. The calmness in his eyes suddenly disappeared and became gentle. After a while he sighed softly. All Dragon Son have the combination of dragon primordial energy and demon soul. I used up my dragon primordial energy just now and forced some of the demon soul out of my body to form that pair of golden feathers. Now, my spirit is damaged and my demonic power is hard to sustain. I can only hold on for a few more hours. You should leave now. When you see the Rock King in the future, tell him. However, Bai Yunxin was not in the mood to listen to him anymore. She moved her body as if she wanted to throw herself at him and hug him. However, she was not a stupid demon who did not know the big picture. She only took half a step forward and stopped dead in her tracks. She could only use her hands to hold the Fiend Lord's hand tightly. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't want to listen. I don't want to listen. How could you? The Fiend Lord sighed softly. He raised his hand and stroked her hair gently. It was unknown whether it was because his body was at the end of its tether or because he did not do this often, but his fingers were trembling. Be good. To think that such emotions would actually appear in this place at this moment between two demons who were known for their cruelty. Furthermore, Bai Yunxian's hands had taken countless lives. It was truly unbelievable. However, at this moment, the two demonesses seemed to be in sorrow and regret. Suddenly, a voice came from behind them. Third sister, I didn't mean to see this. The voice was soft but clear. The tone sounded sincere, but there was a hint of frivolity in it. It was hard to tell whether the person who said this, was it true or not. The Fiend Lord was shocked. However, Bai Yunxin was stunned at first and then shocked. How could she not know who this voice belonged to? Wasn't it Li Yunxin's voice? The two demonesses who were still immersed in grief turned their heads immediately. They saw a tall and slender young man. He was wearing a white robe and had a handsome face. There was a hint of evil charm in his handsomeness, but it was not repulsive. Instead, it made people feel that this person must be a friendly and approachable person. However, he was not a real person but a shadow. At this moment he had an awkward smile on his face. However, no one knew whether the awkwardness was real or fake. When he saw the two of them turning around, he immediately opened the folding fan in his hand and pretended to fan himself. He said, however, third sister, you make me sad that you miss ninth brother so much. Don't tell me that in third sister's eyes, I'm the kind of person who likes to kill my own brothers? If the Fiend Lord was at the peak of the mystic realm, how could he not know that such a thing appeared behind him? However, he was seriously injured just now and couldn't control his emotions because of the conversation with Bai Yunxin. Therefore he really did not notice it. However, they were not to be blamed. Li Yunxin's method of showing himself was made by using the qi of heaven and earth. It was extremely difficult to notice it with normal senses. However, after the shock, Bai Yunxin raised her eyebrows and stared at him. Li Yunxin. You? But the Fiend Lord pulled her hand and took a step forward. The demon kings who were fighting with the skeleton saw the situation and said in a deep voice, Ninth brother. Isn't this your doing? Li Yunxin folded his folding fan and slapped it on his palm. He said seriously, third sister is joking. That day on the battlefield, the people of the mystic sect watched me die. Big brother and second brother also watched me die. Only third sister stood up for me. I, Li Yunxin, have always been clear about kindness and hatred. Why would I do such a thing today? Chapter 547. The evil lord stared at him. After 2 breaths he said again, so you didn't make those 2 monsters come here? Li Yunxin smiled. That's exactly what I did. Bai Yunxin couldn't help but say something. The evil lord pulled her hand again and looked at Li Yunxin. Why? Li Yunxin was still smiling. To kill my brother and brother. Bai Yunxin doubted that she had misheard. The anger on her face had turned into dullness at this moment. She looked at Li Yunxin and then at the evil lord. When she saw the surprise on the evil lord's face, she knew she didn't hear it wrong. He said in front of Long San that he wanted to kill Long Da and Long Air. The evil lord was stunned for a moment before he frowned. Kill the 2 of them. Didn't you just say that you wouldn't kill your own brothers? Li Yunxin said seriously, Sister, you are joking again. The 2 of them sent me to my death and watched me die with their own eyes. How can they be considered brothers? Third sister should have heard of it. Speaking of this, he takes 2 steps and says slowly, I met the true dragon immortal in Dongting. He conferred me the title of Lord of Wei River and treated me well. Sister, you are smart. You should know the subtle relationship between Long Sun and immortal Shinryu. Now, to be frank, I am also one of immortal Shinryu's men. That's why the Divine Lord wants me to do something, and it just so happens that big brother and second brother want to harm me? If third sister were in little brother's position and had such an opportunity, what would you do? The evil lord frowned and said directly, "You mean immortal Shinryu wants you to kill Long's son?" "I don't believe it." Li Yunxin smiled. "Sister, do you want me to stretch my neck and be killed? Or do you want me to be on guard in the future?" The evil lord was silent for a while. Then he heaved a sigh. "Then you heard what we said. My divine soul is damaged now. If you want that thing to kill me, it'll be a piece of cake." Li Yunxin laughed again. "Ah, third sister. Why did he have to say such angry words? I, Li Yunxin, am a man of my words. If I say that I can distinguish between gratitude and grudges, then I will. Moreover, Miss Bai saved me in the past. Even for her sake, I could not do such a heartless thing. Don't ever mention this kind of angry words again. Right now, I'm going to subdue that monster for third sister so that all the demons in the world will know that our relationship is stronger than gold, and that we'll go through thick and thin together." He spoke with deep emotion. However, the evil lord did not speak at this moment. He only looked at him seriously. Bai Yunxin said, "If what you said is true, then save me, your third sister." Li Yunxin turned to look at her, and his expression softened a little. Just like the evil lord, he remained silent for a while, as if he had a question he wanted to ask, but he didn't know if he should say it. If it was someone else, they might have really endured it. However, he was a good person, but his curiosity was as strong as a cat's. Finally, he could not help but say, "Previously on Mount Yunshan, you said that your mother told you that the Xianmen would definitely lose. I think your mother must be a big demon with a high status among the demons." As he said this, he looked at the evil lord. "Just now, she is my daughter," the evil lord interrupted him calmly. The evil lord interrupted him calmly. His double pupils looked extremely clear. "She's my daughter." Li Yunxin was stunned for a moment. His eyeballs looked back and forth between the two female demons. After a while he said, Your godfather is the Golden Rock King, not my godfather, but my biological father," the evil lord said. Li Yunxin's eyes widened. "Wait, third sister, I heard that the demon power in your body came from the Golden Rock King, which means that the Golden Rock King is also your biological father. The fusion of the dragon soul and the demon soul to create the 9 sons is not what the secular people think of," the evil lord said as he raised his hand to touch Bai Yunxin's cheek. "Moreover, demons are demons. The so-called ethics are for people to use. Although you are a demon now, you were a human in the past. You won't be surprised about this kind of thing in the future." However, Li Yunxin still looked like he was shocked. After a while he looked at Bai Yunxin. "So, should you call me little uncle now?" "What?" Bai Yunxin's eyes widened. This kind of word was not common to demons. It was extremely rare. Even with her smart mind, it took her a while to react. A complicated expression appeared on her face. No one had ever told her about this kind of thing and made such a joke. Claiming to be relatives, whether it was a joke or a truth, it was an unprecedented experience for a demon. Looking at her expression, it seemed that she wanted to think about it seriously. Li Yunxin laughed. "I was just joking." "But third sister," he said it affectionately, but his face became serious when he looked at the evil lord. "Few people seemed to know about this before. But now you told me so easily. So, is King Rock going to be born soon?" The evil lord sighed in a low voice. But it was not to express any emotion. It seemed that he was weak and couldn't breathe. "Yes." After a while she said in a low voice, "The tactical eye in Dongting has been broken. Even without the dragon souls in Li Xinyu's body, the big tactical array can't trap King Rock for too long. Now these 2 monsters have appeared and disturbed the chi dynamic in the big tactical array. So yes, King Rock is going to be born soon." Li Yunxin immediately patted the folding fan in his palm again. Good. "In this case, how can I sit back and watch you and my little niece in danger? I can't explain to my brother-in-law in the future. Third sister, just watch me." Bai Yunxin immediately stared at him. "What did you say?" However, Li Yunxin's body suddenly turned into a clear light and disappeared. She didn't finish her words. Originally both of them were desperate and sad. But after seeing Li Yunxin they seemed to have some hope. Therefore, Bai Yunxin grabbed the evil lord's hand and said angrily, "Why did he call me little niece?" The evil lord ignored her little daughter's thoughts. He just patted her hand gently and turned to look into the distance. When he saw that the 2 skeletons could use Taoist spells, he felt it was quite strange. Now, when he looked at the remaining skeleton, he realized it was even stranger. They had just talked to Li Yunxin for a while, and the demons and skeletons were still fighting fiercely. However, at this moment they found that the monster had learned a new skill. Countless bright gold and silver swords were wrapped in the thunderclouds and swept towards the demons like a storm. Wasn't the evil lord very familiar with these little swords? They were her natural supernatural powers. When demons achieved Taoism, they couldn't practice Taoist spells, but they could obtain some natural supernatural powers. For example, they could spit poison, fire, conjure weapons, create illusions, and so on. She was a combination of dragon essence and demon soul. The gold and silver swords were her natural supernatural powers. Therefore, she seemed to know where their Taoist spells came from. These two monsters didn't seem to have any supernatural powers, but in fact they had two most powerful supernatural powers. One of them was the forbidden spell, which could prevent cultivators and demons from using their supernatural powers. The other one was the ability to use their forbidden spell for their own use. The Taoist spells that they used previously must have been the result of attacking the cultivators first. Just thinking about it made one's hair stand on end. However, at least for now, in the eyes of the evil lord, their scary supernatural powers seemed to be at a disadvantage. It would be fine if they had their own consciousness. However, they weren't fully formed yet. They were still muddle-headed. However, Taoist spells and supernatural powers couldn't be used casually. They needed to be focused and coordinated. This skeleton was greedy. Many profound techniques would be used at once during the battle. It looked very frightening, but the techniques would restrain each other, which would greatly weaken the power of the techniques. Only then did the Demon Kings slowly adapt to the situation. After losing dozens of Demon Kings in the first exchange, they were now able to temporarily defend themselves and protect themselves. Even so, they couldn't hurt the skeleton at all. When the evil lord destroyed a monster in an instant, he used up the life force of a Shenmen dragons at the peak of the Shenmen realm. They only felt relaxed when they saw it, but they didn't know the evil lord's current situation. These monster kings had other thoughts. Bai Yunxin's words had convinced them. Therefore, these stupid monsters felt that their evil lord wanted to see their courage and responsibility. As long as they acted bravely and satisfied the evil lord would take care of this huge monster. Therefore they fought calmly. However, they didn't know that the evil lord was already at the end of his strength. If there was no other way, they could only drag the time. When these monster kings were exhausted and the evil lord attacked, they would realize that the best outcome would be for them to die together. They didn't know the situation, but the evil lord and Bai Yunxin knew it very well. It was at this moment that something happened. Although the monster kings didn't have much relationship with each other, after fighting for a while, they slowly formed into three battle groups. One was the main attacker, one was the main defender, and the last one was the support. If they could hold on for a while longer and prevent the skeleton from reaching the evil lord, it would be more than enough. However, the evil lord knew that the skeleton could use other people's supernatural powers. These demons didn't know that. When the evil lord realized that the skeleton was using his golden and silver light sword, he suddenly had an ominous thought. These demons had been fighting with the skeleton for a long time, but he didn't see the skeleton using their supernatural powers. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, he immediately shouted, "Be careful." However, it was too late. She didn't know what method the skeleton used. When dozens of demons went around the skeleton's feet and wanted to jump up to attack its knees, many small figures that looked exactly the same as those demons suddenly appeared from the cracks of the skeleton. The skeleton was huge and the spikes on its bones looked like a steel forest. Now that so many human figures suddenly appeared, the demons were caught off guard. They thought that they had already figured out the skeleton's methods, but they didn't expect it to have new tricks. Now that they were caught off guard, they lost dozens of demons. These dozens of demons didn't die from other methods, they died from their own methods. They couldn't use their supernatural powers now, but the small figures that came from the skeleton could. With such a sudden change, the formation was disrupted. But there were also cases where they were accidentally killed by the skeleton, so it wasn't a big deal. However, at this moment, the spiritual energy in the vicinity suddenly surged. It was as if all the spiritual energy in a radius of dozens of miles was gathering here. In an instant, the spiritual energy in the forest was extremely dense, as if it had turned into a paradise. This was a good thing in the past, but now it had become a disaster. Because the demon's supernatural powers were sealed, so what if the spiritual energy in the vicinity turned into celestial energy? They couldn't absorb all the spiritual energy into their bodies at once, so the benefits were limited. But the skeleton was like a bottomless pit that followed the spiritual energy. It wanted to swallow the fiend lords and the demons because the spiritual energy in their bodies was much more than the spiritual energy in the surroundings. When the chi of heaven and earth changed, the first to benefit was this monster. Before, it was shooting out snake-like lightning, but now it was as thick as a water bucket. Before, it was spitting out green poisonous gas, but now it was a poisonous fog that could melt gold and corrode jade. Before, its movements were slightly slow, like a puppet with rusted joints. But now it suddenly became agile, like it was rejuvenated. With such a change, the originally unpredictable mysterious light in the sky also began to surge, as if something was about to come out. But at this time, no one cared about what was happening in the sky. The demons were already struggling to stay alive, and after a moment of confusion, they lost dozens of them. The formation was immediately defeated. As the saying goes, a defeated army is like a landslide. And at this time the monster was getting stronger. Thus, a monster king shouted in the midst of a desperate battle, "If our Lord doesn't act now, we will all die here. Has our Lord not seen our loyalty?" As soon as he said that, the demons all agreed and turned to look at the Fiend Lord. The Fiend Lord, with her dark golden hair, stood expressionlessly on a high hill, looking down at the demon kings. She didn't care about their cries for help, but she didn't leave either. It was as if she hadn't seen enough of their loyalty, and wanted to see them fight with all they had. Seeing her like this, the demons felt a chill down their spines. When they fought with the skeleton and realized that it was difficult to deal with it, they ran away immediately because they didn't know that the battlefield was sealed. But now they knew that there was no way to escape, and they saw how the Fiend Lord killed one of the skeletons with 3 strikes. Now that they were fighting with the other skeleton, they naturally knew how strong it was. They also realized how strong the Fiend Lord was. Previously, the Zither Lord hadn't fought for many years, and so was the Fiend Lord, who in this world could make her use her full strength. Therefore many of the demon kings started to look down on the Fiend Lord. But tonight, those thoughts were all gone. They all knew that the Fiend Lord was even more terrifying than the skeleton. The monster in front of them was hard to deal with, but the expressionless and silent Fiend Lord was even harder to deal with. If they angered her, they would be courting death. These pitiful demon kings didn't know how to advance or retreat, and they couldn't reason with them. They didn't know if the Fiend Lord wanted to see them all die, or if she felt that they didn't have enough strength. Or did she want one or more of them to die before she was willing to help? As soon as this thought appeared, they were distracted. Once they were distracted, they couldn't hold on any longer. In the blink of an eye, dozens of demon kings died, but they didn't dare to abandon the array and escape. They were in despair. If anyone were to lend a helping hand at this time, even these cruel and merciless monster kings would remember this great favor. But they didn't know what the Fiend Lord was thinking. The Fiend Lord and Bai Yunxin both knew that Li Yunxin seemed to have obtained the ability to control the spiritual energy in this area by chance. The attack of the 2 skeletons was also his doing. In his words, it was to kill Long Da and Long Air. Now, the spiritual energy in this area suddenly became very strong. The demon kings didn't know what was going on, but how could the 2 female demons not know? It must be his doing again. Even though he had said some nice words before he disappeared, the evil lord was slowly realizing that this 9th brother of hers was completely different from the generous and heroic person she had seen on the battlefield that day. His words couldn't be trusted easily. Therefore, when she saw the situation at the bottom of the hill, she was also surprised. What was Li Yunxin planning to do? Was he planning to kill all the demon kings under her command first and then save them? Or was he planning to do something even more terrifying? She couldn't get rid of this worry in her mind. No. Bai Yunxin suddenly said, "Ha!" This sound was incompatible with the current atmosphere and the Fiend Lord's state of mind. Because this sound sounded a little happy, a little relieved, but also a little helpless. The Fiend Lord was distracted. However, he saw that Bai Yunxin was looking up at the sky. Previously, when the spiritual energy in this area was very strong, the sky was full of light. But the demons didn't have time to be distracted, and the Fiend Lord didn't have the mood to look up. But now, as Bai Yunxin looked up, she finally saw what she saw. Slightly stunned, she opened her mouth and said, "What does he mean?" Chapter 548. What the evil lord saw in the sky, under the rolling thick clouds, was some mysterious light dancing. This light appeared when Zither Monarch activated the formation left behind by Wanderer White in Sweeping Mountain. Now that she looked at it carefully, it was not the chaotic scattered light like before. The light and the clouds seemed to be slowly forming an image in the sky. Wasn't it Li Yunxin's appearance? However, when she looked at it, the image was disappearing. When it was disappearing, it was also very imposing. With the whole sky as the background, the light and the clouds formed the outline of his face. It was as if a huge god appeared in the sky, and the people on the ground, even the skeletons, were like ants. This face seemed to have appeared in the sky before, but now it was disappearing. This was what the evil lord saw. She frowned. What was Li Yunxin doing? He first appeared with such a frightening aura, but now it was disappearing. Did something happen to him in the clouds? Thinking of this, she said in a low voice, "Maybe what he said is not trustworthy." "Accent, are you? He didn't want to kill us all." Bai Yunxin interrupted her. "He just wanted us to see." The evil lord did not understand what she was talking about. "See." Bai Yunxin took a step forward so that all the monster kings could see her. Then she screamed, "Oh my god, what is that?" Not to mention the demon kings who were fighting for their lives, even the fiend sovereign beside her was startled by her scream. Her voice was clear and there was an unconcealable surprise in it. It was as if she was speaking from the bottom of her heart. When the monsters heard her scream, they all turned to look at her. He saw that she was looking up at the sky, carefully observing it. So they also looked at the sky. At first they did not pay much attention to it. But now they finally saw it. Above the vast sky, in the firmament, thick clouds surged and rolled like a turbulent ocean. Light swam and shone as if the 9-heaven-star realm had descended to the world. It was these rolling clouds and mystic lights that were slowly and terrifyingly transforming into a giant face. The demon monarchs had never seen such a shocking scene before. Not to mention, at this critical moment of life and death, he was already relaxed and in a daze, and he was dizzy from the battle. Thus, with just a single glance, they were all astonished. He felt that the face in the sky was truly like a deity, its might was unparalleled and its aura was terrifying. In the next moment they saw the face that was looking down at them from the sky. The face let out a thunderous laugh, causing everyone's body to feel slightly numb. "Ha ha! What a joke! When you followed Long Da and Long Air and rebelled against the Emperor Shinryu, did you ever think that you would end up like this?" The scene in front of his eyes was shocking. Now that they heard it, it was even more shocking. These monster kings followed the evil lord here, but they all knew that they were summoned by Dragon Sun Zhu. They said that they were here to attack the Cloud Mountain under the Emperor Shinryu's order. How could they talk about rebellion and disobedience? They were still in a daze, and so was the evil lord. However, it wasn't because of Li Yunxin's face and what he said earlier, but, what does this mean? He turned to look at Bai Yunxin. Just now Bai Yunxin sighed again. It was as if she was most at ease in this confusing situation. A faint smile appeared on her face and she said in a low voice, "Just now, he just wanted to force these demon monarchs into a dead end, and then he would show himself. However, if I didn't see his face in the sky, I think many of the demon monarchs would have died." Seeing that the evil lord was still confused, she paused. It was as if what she was about to say was extremely difficult to explain. But in reality, it was also extremely difficult to explain. "I brought Li Xinyu along with me earlier and she told me a lot about Li Yunxin." Bai Yunxin observed the demon monarchs as she said in a low voice, "I also know a little, about his personality. So, just now, he had already shown up in the sky like this." Speaking of this, she raised her hand and pointed to the sky. Li Yunxin's face was hidden in the thick clouds and mystic light. He looked majestic, solemn, and arrogant. He was saying something like, "Following Long Sun and Long Air to rebel," in a thunderous voice. It sounded like he wanted to push all the blame to the two Long Suns who had been seriously injured now. Just like this, look, the flowing clouds and mystic light slowly surged and flipped, transforming into his face. If you could see this scene, see the sky, his appearance which has never existed before, wouldn't you feel very shocked, very powerful, very... Bai Yunxin paused as if she was a little embarrassed. "Cool. This is what Li Xinyu said." She was with Li Yunxin in Dongting at that time, and she always heard him say such strange words. But the evil lord was still frowning. She didn't seem to understand what Bai Yunxin was trying to say. Or maybe she understood, but she didn't understand or believe that someone would do this. Bai Yunxin was a little anxious. She stamped her feet. "Oh, I mean him. This is what Li Xinyu said." She said that Li Yunxin likes others to see him being beautiful and powerful. So, he likes to do things that make him look powerful. Now he probably felt that the scene of his face in the sky was so shocking that he wanted everyone to see how his face was made. When people see the clouds and mystic light in the sky slowly turning into a face, don't they feel very powerful? But the monster kings were fighting with the monster before, so they didn't have the mood to see what was happening in the sky. But he couldn't say, "Come and see how powerful I look," so he had to make the illusion in the sky again and again, hoping that someone would really look up and see this scene. Otherwise, he wouldn't make a move. I guess if I didn't notice it just now, he would still be so anxious to make some noise to make us look up. As for attracting Reiki just now, he didn't have any other intention. It's just that. Bai Yunshin sighed, "I want to make them feel like they can't handle it." It was even more shocking that he showed up at this time. The evil lord was stunned for a long time. He frowned and looked at her. "What you said, isn't it something that only a 5 or 6-year-old kid can do? I can't see through him. But I know he should be an ambitious person. How could he? Only he would do that." Bai Yunshin blinked. "Do you still remember what I once told you and what Li Xinyu told me? He said that after he got Dongting and became the Lord of Mount Jun, he took out all the gorgeous clothes that the Lord Dongting collected in the human world for many years and put them on himself one by one. He tried them in front of the mirror. After he tried on all 269 gorgeous robes in the palace, he made this white one for himself. His clothes now. It looks simple, but it's decent and beautiful. But it's indeed fitting and beautiful." The evil lord also sighed. It seemed that he didn't know what to say for a while. Now he believed most of what Bai Yunshin said. However, if what Bai Yunshin said was true, Li Yunshin could really be so stubborn sometimes. Even at a very critical moment, he still showed such an unpredictable wayward temper. In her eyes, this almost ridiculous and childish behavior was not a defect. Instead, it made him more alarming. It should be known that whether a person was sinister and cruel or reckless, they all had a certain temperament. It might be hard to figure out. However, after getting along with that person for a long time, or knowing a lot of things that that person did, she could always speculate about his future. But Li Yunshin's, his occasional childish and willful temper, couldn't be measured with common sense. It was like a person who was still smiling one moment, but in the blink of an eye, he turned hostile and stabbed a knife into the other person's stomach. This kind of lunatic was much scarier than a simple bad guy. Her 9th brother. The 9th brother who had seemed so generous and heroic on the battlefield was actually such a person. You would never be able to guess what he was thinking about. The evil king couldn't laugh at his childish and ridiculous behavior at all. However, it had only been a few breaths' time since Li Yunshin appeared in the sky. He made an impassioned speech in the sky and scared the monster kings. Then the monster kings realized a problem. Who was in the sky? In fact, there were quite a number of monsters and demons who were face blind. If not, there wouldn't be so many weird-looking monsters and demons. Some of them might have seen Li Yunshin on the battlefield, but they couldn't remember his face. Now he looked majestic, but his identity was a mystery. Therefore, when the monster kings reacted, someone jumped out of the battle and shouted to the sky, "Who is playing tricks? Do you know who we are under and who we are under?" Another person said to the evil lord, "My lord, this guy is probably someone from Daotong or Kenzo playing tricks. How are Zither Lady and Lord Tongtian now?" The monster kings had been fighting for a long time, but the evil lord was the only dragon son here. She thought that it was enough to have her in charge, and that Long Da and Long Air still had other things to do. After all, the monster kings and the dragon son were very different in status, so no one would deliberately think about such things. However, Li Yunshin, who was in the sky, had said things like heavily injured and treason. She had stirred up the thoughts of the monster kings. After the rain of fire fell, the dragon princes had all dispersed. Where did Long Da and Long Air go? What this person said about the 2 dragon son treason. Was it true? If it was true, the land that Bai Yunshin and Zither Lady had promised them would be gone. Who would have the mood to fight with this scary monster? The evil lord was silent and didn't respond to the monster kings. He only looked up coldly at Li Yunshin's appearance in the sky, and realized that he, Zither Lady, and Hatred had all underestimated his 9th brother. Bai Yunshin had said that he was being willful by changing his appearance in the sky. But now she didn't think so. Li Yunshin had only appeared for a few breaths' time and said a few sentences, but he had already put himself in a desperate situation. And Bai Yunshin didn't seem to know this. The daughter beside her had a helpless and relaxed look on her face. It seemed that she was sure that Li Yunshin would come to save them. According to the current situation, he would indeed come to save them. But she, the evil lord, had become Li Yunshin's pawn. Her 9th brother drove the 2 skeletons here first, and he was sure that they would have a hard fight. Maybe he was also sure that she would come to save them. Then he showed up and said some nice words. Seeing that she was also seriously injured, he said that he would come to save them. Then he triggered the chi of the earth and put the monster kings in a more terrible situation. At this time, the monster generals under her command couldn't hold on anymore, and she should help them. But she had no other choice. If she did, the monster kings would see that she was at the end of her rope, and they would scatter immediately. The only way was to hold on, and put all her hopes on him. If he came to save them, he would be able to solve her problem. If he didn't come, the result would be unimaginable. Because of this, he said that Long Da and Long Air were rebels in the sky. If the evil lord wanted to protect himself and Bai Yunshin from the skeletons, he had to keep quiet and acquiesce. However, this didn't seem to be his ultimate goal. Her ninth brother saw further than ordinary people. When everyone was still thinking about how to get out of this restrictive spell and how to save their lives, he was already looking for a way out for himself after this battle. The Rock King was going to reappear in the world. With the collapse of the Shenmen, the only one who could compete with the Rock King was the Shinryu. However, the Shinryu god had been estranged from the 9 sons of the dragons for a long time. Even though Li Yunshin had met the Shinryu before, he might not be able to gain the trust of the Shinryu. Therefore, he had to find a protector in the upcoming Great Change. Just like the monster kings and monster generals under her command, they also needed her protection. Otherwise, he would be the target of everyone if he was alone. Li Yunshin must have experienced this kind of feeling many times. Therefore, if he wanted to prove his loyalty to the Shinryu god, what should he do? Thinking of this, the evil lord was shocked. Before this, Li Yunshin said that he drove the 2 skeletons here to kill the big brother and the second brother. She had thought that Li Yunshin was just saying it casually. What was the status of the Zither King and the Lord Tongtian? Even though they were both Dragon's son, they couldn't be compared to the Lord of Wei River, Chiwen. When the Grand Supreme Masters didn't come out, the 2 of them were the hidden masters of all the monsters in the world. Otherwise, these 2 people, how could they really gather so many demons to fight against the celestial sect of wonders? Killing these 2 people was indeed a matter that could shake the world. There was no guarantee that there would be many people who had received favors from these 2 people, or those who had other intentions, who would come to seek revenge one after another. It could be said to be incomparably troublesome and dangerous. A smart person like Li Yunshin wouldn't think of this and wouldn't do it. However, now the evil lord realized, if what Li Yunshin had done before, including what he did to the monsters in the world on the battlefield, and saw that he was indeed not accepted by Ryuda, Ruji and Shenmen, he just wanted Shinryu to see it. He wanted Shinryu to see that he was such a lonely person who had nothing to do with other forces. If such a dragon son didn't rely on Shinryu, who else could he rely on? Then, he really killed Ryuda and Ruji. So what if he offended all the monsters in the world? No matter how powerful they were after this battle, could they be more powerful than the Lord of Shinryu? This Li Yunshin. Was everything she had done meticulously planned? Was it just to prove her allegiance to the true dragon and to prepare for the upcoming great changes in the world? Or should it be said that when he was chased by all sides and lived a miserable life, he didn't want anyone's kindness? At that time, everyone thought that he was pitiful, but in fact he did it on purpose. He saw further than everyone else. He did it to please Shinryu? These thoughts appeared in the evil lord's mind and she couldn't stop them. Once she started, the following thoughts would bubble up. The evil lord didn't know if what she was thinking was true or if she was thinking too much and thinking too much about Li Yunshin. However, it was easy to prove these thoughts. She just needed to see what Li Yunshin was going to do next. If he really killed Ryuda or Ruji, if he really wanted to use this opportunity to let all the monster kings know that he was the Lord of Shinryu as confidant, then everything he thought just now would undoubtedly be true. That would mean that the Li Yunshin in Bai Yunshin's eyes was just a mold, a shadow. That Li Yunshin's real thoughts and schemes were far deeper and more sinister than anyone she had ever met. The most frightening thing was, this kind of scheming was hidden under a seemingly childish and willful appearance. He always gave people the feeling that, I've already seen through him. Then she saw Li Yunshin's face in the sky suddenly sneer. Whether it's true or not, don't you know? Who released this thing in front of you? Third sister. Wasn't it released by Guqin Jun and Lord Tongtian? This third sister stunned all the monsters. They knew that the one in the sky should be Long's son. But who was it? All the monster kings looked at the evil lord. But the evil lord didn't say anything. What Li Yunshin said was the truth. These skeletons were indeed released by Guqin Jun in hatred. But he only said part of the truth. It wasn't Long Da and Long Air's intention to come and kill these monster kings. Li Yunshin didn't wait for her to speak and said in a thunderous voice, the 2 of them planned to use your lives and your souls to refine this monster. Once this monster was refined, it would have the ability to compete with the divine monarchs. Think about it, these days did the two of them care about the lives of the monsters? He didn't say much, but what he said was the truth, the limited truth that no one could refute or find a flaw in it. However, when the demon kings heard this, they immediately recalled what had happened in the past few days. Li Yunxin was right. Long Da and Long Air did look like they wanted the monsters to die. Humph. If it wasn't for my third sister who didn't collude with Long Da and Long Air to protect your lives, would you still be alive today? When Li Yunxin said this, the skeletons finally got rid of the monster kings who were distracted and rushed towards the evil lord. Seeing this scene, the huge face in the sky suddenly changed again. Thick clouds and light flowed, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed into the appearance of a person. Seeing this person, a person so huge that he looked like a god, the monsters finally knew who he was. Wasn't he? Water god Long Jiawei, who died in front of the formation that day. Before they could think about how he was still alive and how a mere true realm demon could have such supernatural power, they saw the figure step down from the sky and rush to the back of the skeletons. He roared again like thunder, "Your master is already tied up, how dare you be so arrogant here?" The skeletons seemed to sense someone coming from behind and immediately turned to block. However, the figure transformed by Li Yunxin seemed to have endless divine power. He raised his palm and hit the skeleton's shoulders. The two huge figures collided, once again stirring up a violent wave of air and a flow of spiritual energy. Because of such a scene and the worry and uneasiness in their hearts about what Li Yunxin had said before, the monster kings didn't realize that when the huge figure of Li Yunxin attacked, the spiritual power in this place suddenly became extremely thin. Not only was the spiritual power thin, but the spiritual power once again rushed towards the direction of Cloud Mountain. The thin, snake-like fibers that were swimming in the cracks of the skeletons withered in an instant. This monster that the monster kings were helpless against before was, in fact, an arrow at the end of its flight. But now, in their eyes, there was only such a scene. The huge figure of water god Long Jiawei hit the skeleton's shoulders with one palm, and half of its body collapsed. Seeing this scene, who wouldn't gasp and think that they were muddle-headed and saw wrongly? That evil lord, a great evil lord at the peak of the profound realm, took 3 strikes to kill the skeletons. But this Long Jiao didn't show his real body, and just one palm almost smashed half of its body. What realm and cultivation was he at now? At this moment, only the evil lord sighed. She realized that her previous guess was indeed true. Li Yunxin was paving the way for the future, including this strike of his. He attracted the spiritual power, and the skeleton's murderous intent increased. He attracted the spiritual power, and the skeletons became weak and dispirited. What kind of method did he use to create such a powerful incarnation with the help of the power of heaven and earth, so that one palm could cause terrible damage to this monster? Everything he did was to let these monster kings and other humans and demons who weren't here, but were still alive and hiding, realize his terrible power, which was almost the same as that of the evil lord. Whether people believed it or not, as long as they had such a thought, they would be more afraid of him in the future. Then, after Li Yunxin subdued the skeletons, what he had to do was another thing. As he said, he had to kill Long Da and Long Air. At least one of them had to die so that the world would be shocked, and so that everyone would remember the names Wei River Lord and Li Yunxin. The war between the demons and the profound sect had started with a bang. Li Yunxin's death was just an insignificant interlude. But who would have thought that at the end of the war, it would become the stage for this insignificant person? Everything that was planned by so many people, it was all a wedding dress for him. The evil lord sighed in her heart again. For a moment, whether it was the roar in the sky or the shocked eyes of the monster kings, they all became a vague background in her eyes. She looked at Bai Yunxin, who was beside her. She was looking up at everything Li Yunxin had done, and there was a strange light on her face. She might have really fallen in love with him. But this love of hers actually caused the evil lord to have an unerasable worry and shadow. Chapter 549. The skeleton seemed to be at a disadvantage after being hit by Li Yunxin's attack. However, the giant didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the skull of the skeleton. The next moment, he exerted force with his arm again. The terrifying monster immediately lost its balance and was dragged to the ground by the giant incarnation. It was dragged far away. In the eyes of the demon kings, such a scene couldn't be described with words like shock. It might not be difficult to defeat it. The evil lord had also killed one. However, it was defeated in such a pathetic manner. It was dragged on the ground as if it couldn't fight back at all. Then it was thrown far away by the hand of Li Yunxin's incarnation. It only stopped after the incarnation plowed through a large amount of soil and rocks. It was unimaginable. In front of his incarnation, the terrifying monster seemed to be defenseless. Witnessing such a scene, the evil lord couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "When you were in Mount Yunshan, did you see anything else?" At this moment she could already tell that Li Yunxin had a great trump card in his hands. This trump card was extremely powerful. It could even allow him to play with the battlefield and the two skeletons in the palm of his hand. However, on the other hand, it should be due to some kind of restriction that he couldn't completely control. It seemed that it could only be used at a certain time and place. Once the opportunity was missed, there wouldn't be a second chance. That was why he acted so out of character at this moment. His actions were so exaggerated and pretentious. He couldn't wait to show off all the power of that trump card. He was afraid that he would miss out on anything that could be used. Thinking of this, she was suddenly stunned. Then she said in a low voice, "Impossible?" Bai Yunxin heard her words. "When they were in the mountain, they took away the treasures of the saints of Xianmen." "What's impossible?" The evil lord was silent for a while. Then he said softly, "That legend. On Mount Yunshan, there's a treasure that can make one the leader of all the demons in the world. Could it be that Li Yunxin found that thing? However, if he really found it, based on the current situation, it would be a disaster and not a blessing. Because if it was, that thing could only be used here and now." She could see that Li Yunxin was in a hurry to use that thing's supernatural power to create momentum for himself, and there would be other smart people who could see it too. If Li Yunxin was able to see it, and he wasn't like himself, who had to temporarily maintain a neutral attitude because of his injury and because of his daughter beside him, then Li Yunxin would be in trouble. Who wouldn't covet that kind of thing? He would get himself into trouble. Perhaps none of the demon kings under her command were as smart as him. But among the remaining dragon's son, suddenly, a ball of fire appeared in the west. The evil lord heaved a sigh of relief. Her guess had come true. The fire that appeared in the west was not strong. It looked as hazy and light as Li Yunxin's illusion incarnation. At first, it shot up into the sky like a sharp arrow, but it soon spread out and turned into a strange beast that was over 1,000 feet tall. From afar he looked like a lion. However, his body was much more slender than a lion's. His forelegs were very long and his waist was also very long. There was a thick mane on his neck. However, the mane was made of flames. Even from 100 miles away, one could still hear the roar when the flames burned. The flaming mane surrounded a face that looked like a lion. However, the cheeks were not covered with fur but with fine scales. On its forehead, among the flaming mane, there was a pair of red antlers. And, look at its tail. Its tail was not a lion's tail. It was a long and thin snake tail. However, there was also a flaming mane on this snake tail, and at the tip of the tail, there were 3 rays of golden light that looked like thorns. His whole body was white. It was as dazzling as the sun at noon. This made its flaming mane and red antlers even more dazzling. Just by looking at this fleeting appearance, even those who had never seen it before would know. This was dragons. The huge illusion quickly disappeared. It was as if it was just to attract everyone's attention. And then the voice came, "You dare to confuse right and wrong in front of all the demon kings in the world. Aren't you afraid that you will become the public enemy of all the demon kings in the world and become a stray dog?" The tone of these 3 sentences was extremely unkind, and the voice was also loud, almost the same as the voice of Li Yunxin's incarnation. But the tone was neutral and calm. It seemed to be said by a noble elder without any emotional fluctuations, just stating the facts and rebuking the wicked. This sudden turn of events caused Bai Yunxin to frown. "Jun Shang? It's the Taoist lord," the fiend lord said expressionlessly. After a pause he continued, "Li Yunxin said that the Lord Tong Tian is plotting a rebellion. It's time for the Taoist lord to show up." Hearing these 2 words, Bai Yunxin immediately knew who it was. Among all the dragon's son, the title of Taoist lord was the strangest. The Taoist lord referred to the 5th son of the dragon's son, Shinryu Ryuto, and the demon soul of the lion demon king. Because of his mother, Bai Yunxin knew more about the dragon's son than others. So she knew that this Taoist Lord Dragon 5th had always been on good terms with Long Air and the Lord Tong Tian. This Dragon 5th could be said to be really strange. Ichi was the title he gave himself. If people who didn't know what was going on heard it, they would think that he was some high cultivator from Daotong or Kenzo. But in fact, he was a demon among demons, one of the 9 sons of the dragons. Another strange thing was that his fief was adjacent to the fief of the Lord Tong Tian. It was just to the west of Tong Tian Swamp, including most of the land of Qin, He, and Chi Fan. but there was no conflict between them. Instead, they had many contacts and they were no different from old friends in the human world. The Taoist Lord's Dragon Palace was in the Qi Fan Kingdom. Different from the habit of many demons who like to hide their whereabouts, the Taoist Lord was like a secular person, ostentatiously placing his Dragon Palace next to the Red Abyss. The Red Abyss was a long and deep canyon in the Qi Fan Kingdom. Not to mention the length, it was so deep that one could see the surging lava below. So the area around the Red Abyss was fiery red all year round, and at night it was as bright as day. The name Qi Fan Kingdom came from this. The Taoist Lord Dragon V had set up the Dragon Palace there for many years, saying that he was doing something related to the luck of the demons. He wanted to comprehend a set of martial arts so that all the demons in the world could learn it. In that way the power of the demons would flourish and the right Tao of the world would be in the hands of the demons, not the Xianmen. So he called himself a Taoist Lord. Usually he would concoct pills and comprehend the Tao in the Red Cloud Palace next to the Red Abyss, and he looked like an unworldly master. And that long-air hatred was the result of the fusion of the dragon essence and the demon soul of the Blood Wolf King of the Red Flame Palace. Because of that demon soul, hatred didn't like water but liked fire and was good at playing with fire. So he often went to the Taoist Lord's Red Cloud Palace to stay, and in the long run he became a rare good friend among the demons. Now, it seemed that after hearing Li Yunxin say that Long Da and Long Air Jiao were sent to death by Shinryu's edict, Taoist Lord Dragon V, who was hiding in the wilderness, couldn't help but speak out. After this sound, a golden light rose into the sky from the west. No one knew how this person used a magical power in this chaotic atmosphere, and no one knew what kind of magical power it was. It was clear that this person was only the size of a normal person, and didn't appear to be hundreds of feet tall. However, no matter how far away people were, they could see his appearance, as if he was only 3 or 4 steps away from them. At this time, look at the person in the sky. He was wearing a big red cloak that was in full swing. The robe was also fluttering like flames, as if he was wearing a robe made of fire. But his face was extremely pale. It wasn't the paleness of those lonely ghosts, but the gentleness of white jade. Logically speaking, with this kind of skin color, he should be very beautiful. But this face was embedded with a pair of blood-red eyes, and there was a vertical black line in his eyes. Looking at him like this, it was guaranteed that anyone who saw him for the first time would be scared out of their wits, and would suspect that they had seen a Rakshasa evil spirit. Even the 5 strands of soft and gorgeous jet-black long beard could not change this impression. If that was all, it wouldn't be surprising. Among the demons there were many who looked more unique than him, and his appearance was actually considered ordinary. But this Taoist Lord Dragon V's body was still emitting smoke. It was hard to say where the smoke was coming from, but it was coming from his sleeves, collar, and even his hair. It was as if his entire body was covered in incense, and his face was hazy, like a clay statue in a temple. In his hand was a horsetail whisk with a black jade handle. Since he appeared in the sky, he waved the horsetail whisk and said, "Li Yunxin, now that you are talking to yourself, I'm sure you won't be able to convince me. Why don't you ask Zither Lady and Lord Tong Tian to come out? Let's confront each other at the ancestral court of Daotong and Kenzo under the cloud mountain of Xianmen. What do you think about this?" As soon as he said this, a voice echoed in the forest where he was hiding. Among the tens of thousands of demon beasts who fled in all directions after the rain of fire, except for those who were timid and had a low cultivation base who accidentally ran out of the restrictive spell, the rest of the demon beasts who were slightly famous were not willing to leave. They all wanted to see what else they could take advantage of. In the end, they were trapped in this battlefield. Now that they had regrouped with Dragon Sun or Great Demon Kings, they seemed to be regrouping. After he said this, a Great Demon King on the Evil Lord's side shouted loudly, "We should ask Zither Lady and Lord Tongtan to show up. But let's not talk about other things. Let's first say that you don't want to sacrifice us to those 2 monsters. Our Great Demon King is..." This guy didn't speak because he believed in Li Yunxin, it was just the arrogance of the demons. What Taoist Lord? He wasn't his master, so he couldn't bear to see him being so arrogant. At this moment, shouting a few words and pulling a group of people to cause trouble was indeed the style of the Great Demon Kings. If ordinary people heard what he said, they would ignore it. Everyone knew the habits of the demons, so they would just treat it as bullsh*t. Unexpectedly, when the Taoist Lord heard what he said, he suddenly turned around and stared at them with a pair of blood-red eyes. Although they were hundreds of miles apart, his eyes were like 2 knives stabbing into the Great Demon King's body. "Evil Lord? I don't even know if your Great Demon King is Dragon Sun or Rock Sun. What right does she have to speak?" Chapter 550. As soon as he said that, the demons under the evil lord were in an uproar. Perhaps they were not loyal enough to serve the evil lord to the death. However, at a time like this, the surviving monsters of the world were all gathered in the mountains, and Dragon Fifth was reprimanding their own elders. How could they have any face to speak of? After all, the skeleton was dragged away by Li Yunxin's incarnation. It fell on the ground and didn't get up for a long time. The group of demon kings immediately became agitated and started scolding. They were shocked when they heard the scolding. Before this, the rain of fire had dispersed and the skeleton had appeared. It was as if the demons who survived the rain of fire had left this place. The mountains were indeed quiet. It was as if the tens of thousands of demons who survived the rain of fire had left this place. There were only a few demon kings here. Unexpectedly, when the hundreds of demon kings and demon generals under the evil lord's command started cursing and swearing, the forest to the west of the mountain was immediately filled with loud noises. Judging from the number of voices, there were several hundred of them, and each of their voices was like a great bell, like rolling thunder. It could be seen that their cultivations were extraordinary and profound. Only then did they realize that those guys had been hiding. They saw the demons fighting the monsters and didn't help. Although they didn't know each other and didn't have the responsibility to help, the demons here didn't care. But the demons on the other side didn't care so much. Anger surged in their hearts. Words like hiding the head and showing the tail, and as timid as a mouse, were considered elegant. Even more curses that no one had ever heard of came out in rapid succession, cursing all the demons that were hiding in the area. At first, it was the demon kings and demon generals under the evil lord and the Tao lord who were scolding. Now that they said that, the other demons couldn't hold it in anymore. So all of a sudden, they thought that there was almost no one in the mountains, but something seemed to have startled a flock of noisy birds. The demon kings who were originally hiding and watching could not help but show their prowess. Only then did he realize that the place was actually densely packed with people. There were tens of thousands of demon kings and demon generals who were hiding in the mountains, and this didn't include the ones who didn't say anything. A few days ago this place was the ancestral court of Xianmen. A few hours ago, it was the terrifying Shura battlefield. But at this moment, it seemed to have become a market where demons gathered. In just a quarter of an hour the whole world was filled with curses. All the old scores and grudges from the previous battles were dug out. Li Yunxin had experienced the demons' ability to stir up trouble in Hatred's Guanyuan crypt. They could even start a group fight while walking, let alone now. At first, the two sides were shouting insults. But the flames of war soon spread. Nobody knew why or what happened, but flowers bloomed everywhere. After a dozen or so breaths of time, the mountain began to erupt with continuous sounds and flames. Since the celestial sect, the great enemy, had been destroyed, and now that they had lost their backbone, it would be strange if they did not fight with so many demons gathered in one place. The Tao Lord did not seem to have expected that his 3 sentences would cause such a situation. He stood in the sky with a solemn expression and shouted a few times. But at this time whose voice was not loud. In terms of loudness, some demons were more capable than the dragons. His few shouts were drowned in an even louder noise. The birds and beasts in the forest panicked because of this noise, and some of them were even shaken to death. So when he showed up he was very majestic and shocking. But now the fiendish demons were all ferocious and ruthless. They ignored him. Now he was standing alone in the sky, shining brightly. It was also extremely embarrassing. Seeing him like this, Bai Yunxin sneered, "My lord Lao Ai overestimated himself. I will teach him a lesson for you." This female demon had never been a gentle and virtuous person. She did not make a move before because she was forced by the situation, but in fact she was very angry. Now that she saw the Tao Lord Dragon Fifth, she had nothing to be afraid of. She had returned to the peak and she was in the mysterious realm of Shi. And the Tao Lord was the same. Although she did not know what other tricks he had hidden, it was not a big deal to fight. However, after she said this, the evil lord frowned slightly. "Don't act rashly. Something is not right." The evil lord was one of the strictest among the demons. But at this time she kept tolerating. She tolerated Li Yunxin, and in the end she tolerated the Tao Lord whose cultivation was much lower than hers. This made Bai Yunxin widen her eyes and she said coquettishly, "My lord. How dare he say such a thing to me?" The evil lord ignored her temper and only looked at the Tao Lord in the sky with a slight frown. "Seems like they are all hiding their strength." Bai Yunxin was taken aback for a moment by his worried tone. At this time the demons were in a mess. It was also when Li Yunxin's gigantic incarnation illusion fought with the skeleton and knocked it to the ground again. No matter what method he used to create this incarnation, it was terrifyingly strong. Bai Yunxin quickly understood the meaning of the evil lord's words. At least at this moment, Li Yunxin's strength was beyond everyone's expectation, and Dragon Fifth's cultivation was worlds apart from the evil lord's. Where did he get the courage to stand up for her? You don't have to ask when you already know the answer. First, invite the Zither King and the Lord Tongtian out. Ha, it's the fifth brother. Li Yunxin's incarnation smiled. Since we are family, it's easier to talk. The Taoist lord seemed to dislike people interrupting him. So after Li Yunxin said this, he was silent for a moment, looked at him sternly and said in a low voice, "You are not worthy to be my family. A Pingzi and a fake Long Jiu, you have caused a lot of trouble. Do you think that with your little tricks you can—" In the end he was interrupted again. King Bastard Lion, I am giving you face, don't be so ungrateful. Li Yunxin's incarnation, who was laughing just a moment ago, suddenly pulled a long face and scolded. His scolding stunned not only the Taoist lord but also the demons. They were not Bai Yunxin. In fact, when the Taoist lord spoke, she already knew that Li Yunxin was going to explode. He was a person who changed his attitude faster than flipping a book, and he did not feel any pressure. Just by looking at his smiling face, she felt that he was a reasonable person, and that he would definitely suffer a big loss. But after this moment of shock, the whole Scroll Mountain was filled with thunderous cheers. The atmosphere was joyous as if it was the new year. If someone else saw this, he would definitely feel puzzled. However, those who knew the demons well knew that these demon kings and demon generals were mostly bastards who, once they got angry, would not stand on the side and would not care about right or wrong. The Taoist lord was noble, and the moment he appeared, he was majestic. Now he was scolded by Li Yunxin, which was what the unruly demon kings loved the most. If the Zither King or the Lord Tongtian evil lord were to go up, he would probably do the same. He did not stop after scolding. He reached out his hand and suddenly scooped up something on the ground. He grabbed it with two huge fingers and lifted it up into the air. Then he shouted, "Confrontation. Okay, let me confront you. Look who this is." The guy that he lifted up was someone that everyone recognized. It was the Lord Tongtian Hatred. Therefore, the cheers and cheers gradually died down. Even the Taoist lord, who was blushing after being scolded by Li Yunxin, paused. Li Yunxin said that Long Da and Long Air were rebelling. This matter sounded very distant. Not to mention the fact that this statement was unbelievable, it was far from the truth. Even, it was hard to say what he could do to them. The world knew that the Lord Shinryu and the Dragon Sun did not get along very well. Even if they were really rebelling, so what? The Zither King was at the peak of the mystic realm, and the Hatred Lord was a great demon who had reached the mystic realm. Both of them had terrifying power among the demons, and they were one of the top existences in the world. Such people could cause changes in the world if they were killed or imprisoned. They needed to be extremely careful when dealing with them. Influence and power, the two complemented each other. Even the Lord Shinryu could not help but be restrained. Previously, when Li Yunxin said all this, those who were a little smart but didn't know the inside story would have a reasonable guess. This Longjiu just wanted to make a fuss about it and benefit from it. Perhaps the Zither King and the Lord Tongtian were really in some kind of trouble at the moment, so he took this opportunity to stir up trouble. But if he really wanted to do anything to them, no one dared to think about it. Therefore, they thought that it would take a lot of words, probing and arguments before the topic would really turn to the two rebels that he mentioned. Then, after a battle of influence and power, it would end in a gentle situation that everyone could accept. But it was hard to imagine that at this moment, the Lord Tongtian Hatred, the unparalleled great demon, was now tied up by a green iron chain. The two fingers of the giant illusion held the other end of the iron chain, dangling the Hatred Lord in the air, looking like a puppet with a broken string. And the Lord Tongtian himself was still awake. His eyes were open and no one knew what he was thinking. He didn't struggle and he didn't speak. He looked at the situation in the mountain from the sky, and then looked up at the Lord Taoist in the sky. He still didn't speak. Thus, the mountain gradually quietened down. A strange silence spread, and in the end, even the birds' cries could be heard clearly. Even the most stupid demon began to realize one thing: the civil war of the Dragon Sun seemed to be about to begin. Seeing that the Taoist monarch was frowning in silence, Li Yunxin sneered, "If you want to ask, then ask. Ask them if they were the ones who did it and if they were faking the edict. Do they want to send all the heroes and demons in the mountains to their deaths?" After he said this, the evil lord suddenly snorted in a low voice. No one knew whether she was laughing or expressing something else. However, after she said this, the Lord Taoist who wanted Li Yunxin to bring Long Da and Long Air out to confront them still didn't speak. He was strangely silent. Bai Yunxin frowned. Lord Taoist? The Lord Taoist's behavior was very strange. Because he should know that the one in Hatred Lord's body now wasn't Hatred Lord himself. It was their real ninth brother, Dragon Son Qi Wen. He can't say it. The evil lord looked around and said in a low voice, "What is he saying? To tell all the demons in the world that it isn't Lord Tong Tian himself, but Qi Wen. Then all the demons will know the secret of the immortal dragon soul. Once they know this secret, they will understand how much Shinryu wants to take back the dragon soul." At that time, these demon kings and demon generals have no loyalty to speak of. Then, between Shinryu and Dragon Son, there will be no suspense. No one will believe that Shinryu will lose. The evil lord sighed. If he says it, he will help Shinryu and Li Yunxin. Chapter 551. After saying this, she paused and suddenly smiled. I want to see how they attack and defend. This scene is interesting. Guess what Li Yunxin will do? What will Lord Taoist do? Her smile made Bai Yunxin stare blankly. Jun Shang? Because the evil lord didn't look relaxed at first. A demon at the peak of the Xian realm saw his brothers kill each other, but was constrained by the situation and had to endure it. Anyone would feel indignant about such a thing. On the other hand, the Fiend Lord's face was as dark as still water and he looked unhappy. But now he suddenly smiled and asked Bai Yunxin to tell him their plans. It seemed that he became relaxed. The Banshee was puzzled by this turn of events. That was then and this is now. The evil lord saw his daughter's confusion and said in a light tone, "Before this, I didn't know what Li Yunxin wanted to do and whether he really wanted to kill Zither Lady and Lord Tong Tian. Looking at the situation now, I know he wants to be friendly to us and find some allies. Since he wants to find allies, it means he doesn't want to completely break with us, the Dragon Son. Now that Lord Taoist has shown up and the demons are watching, he won't dare to kill Zither Lady and Lord Tong Tian. He won't kill them, he just wants to vent his anger and then give the thing he got from Cloud Mountain to Zither Lady or Lord Tong Tian. With such a contribution, all the demons in the world can see it. I will say a few words for him and this matter will be over." However, he has also made his stand clear to the true Dragon God, letting the Divine Lord know that he is indeed his man. As for the powerful thing in his hand, if it is really a treasure that can control all the demons, he gave it to Zither Lady and Lord Tong Tian, which is a disaster. If Lord Shinryu knows about this, he won't let it go. And looking at the situation now, although that thing is powerful, it is not as powerful as the legend says. If Zither Lady really took it, she will get herself into big trouble. Sigh. But who would dare to destroy such a precious treasure? It will be troublesome. Bai Yunxin was a clever demoness. But this kind of analysis was not her forte. She did not fully understand the evil lord's words, but she finally understood what her mother was trying to say. With the Tao Lord and the demons around, Li Yunxin did not dare to kill Long Da and Long Air. Because if they killed him they would be in the wrong. Although the demons were heartless, they still had some sense of hierarchy. Even if Long Jiu killed Long Da or Long Air, it was still unreasonable. If any more Tao Lords stirred up trouble, they would immediately become the target of public criticism. The best thing he could do was to humiliate Long Da and Long Air in front of the crowd of demons. Once he vented his anger, he would let the crowd of demons know of his own abilities. In this way no one would die. Those demons would be happy to see the high and mighty Long Sun being humiliated. Instead they would praise Li Yunxin for his courage. Then her mother would come forward to mediate. It was because of this that Li Yunxin showed goodwill to the evil lord. Then, Li Yunxin would give those legendary treasures to Zither Master and Lord Tong Tian. So, the grudge between the two sides was temporarily resolved. Li Yunxin survived and gained a reputation in front of the demons. Zither Master and Lord Tong Tian got the treasures that even Lord Shinryu feared. Everyone was happy. Because those treasures were too important. It was not something that Li Yunxin could monopolize. And the power of those treasures did not seem to be as great as the legends said. To him it was of little value. She felt that the evil lord's words were very reasonable. However, she felt that something was wrong. This was because the Li Yunxin in the evil lord's deduction seemed to be too normal. That was not the Li Yunxin that Bai Yunxin knew. What if he killed them? Bai Yunxin asked the evil lord. The evil lord smiled softly and shook his head. He is a smart man. He has the guts. but he doesn't have the guts. If he kills either Zither Master or Lord Tongtian, if he doesn't have something that can convince all the demons in the world, he won't be able to live. Now that I think about it, he doesn't have that thing. Bai Yunxin could not refute such a deduction. She was silent for a while. Then, what do you think he will do next? The evil lord stared at the huge illusion and the figure of the Lord of Tao in the distance. He said, "The one in second brother's body is Little Nine. It is said that when Little Nine was in the cave he asked Li Yunxin for help. It seems that they have a deep hatred for each other but also a good friendship. It is strange. Let me guess. Since Li Yunxin cultivated the painting Tao, she should be able to use some method of the painting Tao to create a new body for Little Nine. Whether he succeeds or not, he will definitely be able to persuade Little Nine with his eloquence. Then next, I guess he will borrow Little Nine's mouth to talk about the bad things that hatred has done so that all the demons in the world can hear." The Lord of Tao can't refute. He has his own difficulties. As soon as she finished speaking, Li Yunxin opened his mouth again. You don't want to talk. If you don't want to talk, let your second brother talk. Lord Tongtan, let me ask you, did you guys create this monster? When the huge incarnation asked this, it was still stepping on the skeleton. He didn't kill it as if he wanted to use it as evidence. The Lord of Tao said he wanted to confront it, and this Li Yunxin really did it. The demon kings had never seen such a scene before. For a moment there was silence and they all looked up to the sky. After 2 breaths, the Lord Tongtan looked around timidly and said, "Yes." The demons were immediately in an uproar and the sound of cursing filled the sky. The birds and beasts in the mountain panicked and ran around. Li Yunxin pressed his hand down from the sky, and the demons quieted down again. The Lord of Tao frowned when he saw this. Previously when he shouted in the sky, no one listened to him. Li Yunxin asked sternly again, "To make this monster you need to refine souls. Did you use the souls of tens of thousands of demon soldiers and demon kings to refine it?" Lord Tongtan sighed again and said, "Yes." Before the demons shouted again, Li Yunxin shouted again, "You and Guqingjun gathered so many heroes here. Did you plan to bury everyone here and then refine many souls into demon power for your own use? Then you asked this monster to attack Cloud Mountain and get the treasure?" Hearing this, the Lord of Tao couldn't help but say, "Nonsense." However, none of the monsters paid any attention to him. They were all staring at the Lord of Tongtian. Lord Tongtan turned to look at the angry Lord of Tao, and then at Li Yunxin. However, Li Yunxin kept a straight face and her expression did not change at all. He sighed softly and said, "Yes." Now, the whole Manwan Mountain was in an uproar. Bai Yunxin watched all this with a frown. Although the demoness' love was all for Li Yunxin, she couldn't help but say when she saw Qi Wen's current look, "Bah! This dragon Xiaojiu used to hide when he saw me. He was as timid as a needle. Now he died and he was even more useless." The evil lord sighed. "He was different from you. Although he was about the same age as you, he was just a child who was not loved or disciplined." Alas, the old lord of Dongting was by his side, but he didn't dare to be too close to him. Bai Yunxin snorted disdainfully and said, "Now that the Lord of Tao can't do anything." "Lord," the evil lord smiled slightly, "not necessarily. Although Li Yunxin has a way to control the skeleton, he must know that it is also a very scary thing. Otherwise he wouldn't have asked us to destroy one and leave only one. He kept it for 2 reasons. One was to use it as evidence, and the other was to frighten the demons so that they would be patient enough to listen to him until now. At this time, since the truth is clear, I guess he will destroy the skeleton first in case he can't control it anymore." Bai Yunxin blinked. "This is a good thing." The evil lord was silent for a while and looked at Bai Yunxin. "Think about it. How can you stand here and talk to me now?" The female monster was stunned. Then she gasped, "Lord Tongta. Just like you, he has a way to wake up from his deep sleep." The evil lord nodded slightly. "He is waiting for Li Yunxin to deal with the skeleton." Without saying anything, Bai Yunxin turned around and was about to fly up. However, the evil lord immediately pulled her back. "You just have to watch." The female monster said anxiously, "But now he has fallen into the trap of the Lord of Tao and Lord Tongtian?" Out of nowhere, the evil lord asked her another question, "Don't you really love him?" "Then don't let him be too proud." The evil lord said softly, "It's better to provide help in times of need than to add flowers to brocade. According to what you said, he has always been a cold person, but he has some feelings for you. If you didn't save his life, would he treat you differently? If you really love him and want to get him, you have to make him suffer first. Otherwise, it will be hard for you to tame someone like him. Bai Yunxin still looked worried. The evil lord smiled again. I'm not asking you to harm him. You just don't know. The female monster wanted to say something, but it was too late. Seeing that the demon kings and demon generals were agitated and that the Dao Lord was furious but helpless, Li Yunxin sneered 3 more times and pointed at the skeleton under her feet. This monster has the resentment of the souls of many heroes in the world. Therefore, even if it is a powerful weapon, I, the Wei River Dragon King, don't care about it. Now, I will destroy it here and now to comfort the many demons who have been killed by the Zither Master and Lord Tongtian. The demons were not very firm in their stand. They just wanted to see who did the best and who said the nicer words. Now that they heard Li Yunxin's beautiful words, they felt proud. They had also become one of the many demons. As a result, they all cheered, and the anger that was originally soaring to the heavens was instantly replaced by a joyous atmosphere, and heroic sentiments surged. At this time, Bai Yunxin finally couldn't help but shout, "You!" But her voice was drowned and it was too late. Li Yunxin attacked very quickly, as if he was about to lose control of the skeleton and finally decided to end it quickly. He punched the skull of the skeleton, and there was a sound of metal rubbing against stone. Just like when the evil lord killed the first skeleton, the skeleton turned into countless tiny specks of dust and vanished into thin air. After this attack, the huge illusion of Li Yunxin shrank rapidly. It became the size of a human and stood in the sky, only holding the iron chain that bound Lord Tongtian in his hand. Maybe it was because the attack just now had consumed too much energy and could no longer maintain the huge illusion. The demons cheered loudly. In the sea of cheers, the evil lord chuckled, "It's done." As soon as she finished saying this, high up in the sky, the iron chain that bound Lord Tongtian hatred suddenly made a series of sharp buzzing sounds. It was as if the person who was bound by it suddenly had endless power and was about to break the chain. The air around him was also stirred up. The strong wind was howling in all directions with him as the center. That was because of the wind pressure caused by Lord Tongtian shaking his body. The real Lord Tongtian hatred had woken up. When they saw this scene, the waves of noise that covered the mountains and plains gradually stopped. Finally, the evil Lord Taoist laughed. He did not laugh out loud. But there was a kind of coldness in his laughter, without any joy. "Ha! Lord Tongtian, our 9th brother has made a name for himself in front of all the demon kings in the world. He is really capable." After saying this, he glanced at Hatred and laughed again. "Ha! Even Lord Tongtian can't get rid of his magic weapon? No wonder he has the guts to ruin our plan." Hatred indeed couldn't get rid of it. However, since he couldn't break free, he didn't seem to mind and stopped. Now, the real Lord of Tongtian was only a few feet away from Li Yunxin in the sky. He turned his face and stared at Li Yunxin for a while without any expression, then said, "9th brother, you are not the Lord of Tongtan. Since you are lucky to not die, why do you still want to die?" Before this, he was bound by Li Yunxin and looked dejected and helpless. Therefore, the demons didn't take him seriously and only thought that he was going to die. But now, from the conversation between the evil Lord Taoist and Lord Tongtian, even the most stupid guy realized that the dejected Lord Tongtian seemed to be a fake. And it could be seen that the mighty Long Jiu seemed to have fallen into the trap of his 2nd brother and 5th brother. This is really a big show. Since that was the case, the crimes that he had listed in the past regarding Long Da and Long Air were also doubtful. This Lord Tongtian Yazi actually had some prestige among the group of demons. Now that he showed up again and showed his majestic aura, some kind of awe emerged from the hearts of the demons again. Therefore, after only a quarter of an hour, no one made any noise. After saying this, Hatred looked down at the iron chain on his body and shook it slightly. The iron chain rattled. Hatred raised his head again and stared at Li Yunxin calmly. "Untie it. I will spare your life." Li Yunxin looked dumbfounded. He stared straight at Yazi for a while, then said, "You? How could you?" "No, you." He took a step back and suddenly shouted, "You are still in my hands. How dare you say you will spare my life?" However, almost everyone could hear it. His shout seemed to be full of fear. Chapter 552. Hatred was still very calm. He was neither angry nor smiling, of course. "9th brother. What do you dare to do to me?" Li Yunxin roared, "I will kill you." In the end, Yazi smiled slightly. "Oh? 9th brother. You kill me here and then?" He paused and his smile suddenly disappeared. His face became gloomy and scary again. "Then do you still want to live? Do you think I don't know what you are using now?" Li Yunxin's expression froze for a moment. The next moment he suddenly frowned, and his eyes were like two sharp arrows piercing towards hatred. What? What did you say? At this moment, hatred's body was still bound by the green iron chain. And the iron chain was still in Li Yunxin's control. However, when he looked at Yazi now, it was as if he was looking at a ferocious beast. It was as if it was not him who controlled Yazi but Yazi who controlled him. Humph. Hatred snorted coldly, I know the things on Cloud Mountain better than you. When they were talking, they used their supernatural power so that their voices could be heard by the people hidden in the mountains. But at this moment, Hatred retracted his supernatural power. Only Li Yunxin and Lord Daoist could hear his voice. You. Li Yunxin stared at him. You are bullsh** ting. But when he said this, his expression was solemn. His eyes never left Hatred's face. Obviously, he wanted to see any trace of evidence on Hatred's face that could make him overturn what Hatred said before. This meant that, in fact, he seemed to have believed the words of the Lord Tongtian. Hatred sneered again. However, his smile had already become more and more composed. What you are using to seal this battlefield now is the Heaven and Earth Mother Plate. What you are using to control those two monsters is also the Mother Universe Plate. Even if you use the Heaven and Earth Mother Plate in this illusion. Li Yunxin shouted in a low voice, you made up something and you want to, black and white gas, right? Hatred looked at him calmly. On the Mother and Earth Plate, there are black and white energies circulating, which represent the yin and yang energies in this world. The child plate of the Heaven and Earth Mother-Child Plate was made of special iron. The mountains and rivers of this world are engraved on it. The black and white gases are flowing in the engravings, aren't they? Li Yunxin's expression was dull. How did you? The Tao Lord and I have been scheming for many years. Then we borrowed Zither Monarch's hand to create the great momentum from before. I was so close to picking it up, but in the end you accidentally snatched it first. Ninth brother, should I say that your luck is too good, or that it's terrible? The Tao Lord was not far from the two of them to begin with. Now that he heard what Hatred said, he smiled slightly. In my opinion, it's too bad, extremely bad. I can only laugh at you for thinking that victory is in your hands, but you don't know. So what if you find the Mother and Earth Mother-Child Plate? Do you think you can use it? Li Yunxin's eyes widened and he actually stuttered, Who said I can't use it? I will now. Of course you can use it. But it's just a temporary measure. Hatred shook his head. At this moment he was still restrained by the soul-reaping iron chain in Li Yunxin's hands. However, he didn't look like a prisoner but a king. Li Yunxin's aura and demeanor, when compared to him, made him seem like a helpless nobody. The Mother and Earth Mother-Child Plate can change the earth energy and luck of the world. With that treasure in hand, the entire world would become one person's. If you want the mountains to rise, it's something that can happen in the blink of an eye. If you want the big river to change its course, it's also something that can happen in the blink of an eye. If you want to create dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of heavenly abodes, it's also not difficult. With that thing you will become the ruler of the world, the living God. Hatred looked at Li Yunxin. Can you do it now? At this time, Li Yunxin finally couldn't say a word. His mouth opened and closed, and after a long time he said, What the hell is going on? Qingjun. Hatred turned to look at Lord Daoist and smiled. Suddenly he dragged his voice a little, as if he finally said something more interesting. Qingjun. Hatred said, Young Dragon Master has the world in his heart. He wants to change the world, see the world as his own, and make a great cause. Our young Dragon Master only cares about the general trend of the world, the future of demons, and the rise and fall of humanity. How could he care about trivial things like Heaven and Earth Mother and Child Plate, and Lord Tongtian Hatred? Since young Dragon Master wants to clear the world for himself, we are happy to borrow his power to get what we want. It's a pity that our young Dragon Master, Yazi glanced at Li Yunxin from the corner of his eyes. You injured him heavily, didn't you? The Guanyuan crypt refines the demon power into his body, but you reversed it at the critical moment. I'm afraid he will be no different from a disabled person. Alas, Heaven and Earth Mother and Child Plate, you don't have the Inata pen and only use brute force to reverse the chi of two elements, but you can have such power. Fifth brother, it's indeed a good thing. Young Dragon Master. Lord Daoist smiled, you're just biting off more than you can chew. There's nothing to talk about. Li Yunxin can't wrap her head around the truth that no one can figure out. Something's not right. Gu Qingjun also said that she wanted to find the treasure that controls all the demons in the world. How could she not know about it? Nonsense. I don't believe it. At this moment, Li Yunxin seemed to be a little crazy. But hatred and Lord Daoist seemed to understand his craziness, and there was nothing they could do at the moment. Because at least for now, hatred was still restrained by Li Yunxin, and Li Yunxin was still controlling the heaven and earth mother and child plate on Cloud Mountain. But hatred and Tao Wu didn't seem to be afraid of the power that Li Yunxin had. Or, they planned to use the information they had, which was actually another kind of powerful power, to make Li Yunxin afraid to use the power he had. And even, to hand it over obediently. Because everyone only thinks that rumor is a rumor. Stupid brother. Hatred looked at him playfully, and, no one in this world believes that thing really exists like me and Lord Daoist. Because only the two of us have seen the Inata pen, and know that the heaven and earth mother and child plate does exist. Li Yunxin finally couldn't help it. The Inata pen? What is it? Hatred and Lord Daoist laughed again. Li Yunxin had entered a state of madness because of panic and shock. And now, in this state of madness, he began to be interested in what they were talking about. This meant that his reason was slowly giving in. His will began to weaken, and he even took the initiative to hand over part of the control of this matter to the two of them. He asked a question that only the two of them knew the answer to. Hatred glanced at Lord Daoist. Fifth brother, tell him. Let him know what he has in his hands now. If he gives that thing to us and cooperates with us, what can he get? Lord Daoist sighed softly. It seemed that he didn't like to waste time sharing the secrets he knew with people like Li Yunxin. But in the end he still slowly opened his mouth. Many years ago, before the Red Cloud Palace was built, I traveled around the world. I wanted to understand something and create the great Tao that I pursued. When he said these words, the smoke on his body became thicker. It was as if the incense in front of a statue of a god was becoming more and more prosperous, and it also made his face more and more hazy. Later I walked to the Red Abyss and by chance I found the Inata pen and got it. When Lord Daoist said this, hatred frowned almost imperceptibly. It seemed that he also wanted to know the details of how Lord Daoist got the Inata pen. It was just that Lord Daoist had never told him in detail before, and now when he told Li Yunxin he only mentioned it briefly, which made Lord Tongtian a little disappointed. There are other relics where I got the Inata pen. There are ancient inscriptions on the relics. The words are difficult and obscure, but the general meaning can be understood. That is to say, Lao Ai paused and looked impatiently at Li Yunxin, who had a panicked expression. This is really the owner of the Inata pen. He used to be the managing pen in the formation of the Mother and Child Universe disk. And the Heaven and Earth Mother and Child Plate Array is a powerful array that can change the flow of qi in the world and the topography of mountains and rivers. But later on, there was a great war that almost destroyed the entire world. The owner of the Inata pen died. However, it was not because he was not strong enough, but because he was betrayed and plotted against by his companions. He was unwilling to accept this, so he left behind these words on his deathbed. He wanted, when he said this he looked at hatred again, the person who wants to find this treasure will open the Heaven and Earth Mother and Child plate again in the future to fulfill his last wish. Li Yunxin seemed to be attracted by his incredible story, and his whole mind was immersed in it. When he heard this he subconsciously asked, "Last wish? What last wish?" He looked like he believed it. When he faced the Taoist Lord he was majestic and arrogant. However, in the blink of an eye the situation was reversed. Now he looked like a fool. This made the Taoist Lord feel strange pleasure in his contempt, but he still snorted coldly and said, "Last wish is, to destroy all the gods in the world." Li Yunxin was stunned. Gods in the world? But soon he frowned. What gods in the world? Aren't the time gods the demons? You want, idiot? The Taoist Lord raised his eyebrows, making his blood-red eyes look even more terrifying. Today's humanity, demons and celestial beings, all appeared after that war. The gods in the world before the catastrophe are the celestial beings today. Li Yunxin blinked, lowered his eyes for a very short time and then looked up again. Neither the Taoist Lord nor the Lord Tongtian noticed this detail. But if Lu Gongzan was here he would know. When Brother Xian was seriously thinking about a problem, it was very difficult for ordinary people to see it. They could only see him leisurely as if he didn't have any thoughts at all. But in fact his mind was working very fast. But there was another situation that was extremely rare, just like now. One thing made him lower his eyes. This meant that he was thinking so attentively and thinking so fast that even a person like him was temporarily distracted and revealed a flaw. After that, he raised his head again, his eyes full of surprise. How arrogant. What heaven and earth Mother Earth plate. It's nothing more than mobilizing the earth chi. How dare you boast about destroying all the celestial beings, you really— These words seemed to have finally scratched the Taoist lord's itch. He smiled coldly. Nothing more? Li Yunxin. Now that the heaven and earth Mother Earth plate is in your hands, it's like a Xianmin saint's flying sword in the hands of a mortal. That mortal doesn't know how to control it. It's nothing more than cutting melons and vegetables. For example, you say it's sharp today, but you think it's just sharp. But you don't know, if it's used properly, not to mention cutting gold and jade, it can even split a mountain and cut a river. Heaven and earth Mother Earth plate, the Taoist lord shouted. What you're using now is only the child plate. There's another mother plate that you don't know where is, right? Even if you know, it's useless. The changes you're deducing on the child plate have to be printed on the mother plate with this Enata pen for it to last. Otherwise, it'll be like you today. Forcefully reversing the chi of heaven and earth must be extremely strenuous, and the effect will be short-lived. Just now, you killed the skeleton instead of continuing to use it to subdue the demons. You also felt that it was getting more and more difficult to control. After hearing his words, Li Yunxin finally fell silent and did not speak for a long time. Seeing him like this, the Taoist lord snorted coldly and ignored him. Hatred said, "Now you know. You should also know what kind of power this thing can unleash in our hands. Previously in the mountains, you were afraid that I would devour you and harm you. You should know by now that your mere dragon soul isn't worth my time. If it wasn't for little Nine mysteriously running over to me, and the upcoming battle, I wouldn't have the mind to pay attention to anything else. I wouldn't even want him. So, hand over the heaven and earth subplate. With the Enata pen, the Taoist lord and I will be the rulers of the world. By then, who cares if you live or die?" Hatred was no longer expressionless when he said this. His tone was more vivid and sincere. "But after a few encounters with you, I know that you're a mere transcendent state cultivator, but in such a short time, you're able to fight against the most powerful beings in the world. You're not someone easy to control. So don't even think about staying by our side and getting a share of the pie. The Taoist lord and I can promise you nothing more than to spare your life and let you go. But this is all before. Now, under the premise that you immediately remove this iron chain and hand over the heaven and earth subplate." "Ninth brother," Hatred looked at him. "Even a demon's lifespan is as short as the morning dew when compared to heaven and earth. Life is short, you'd better not make any more mistakes." Li Yunxin was silent for a while and then sighed. "I see," he said softly. "I say, why does this fifth brother Tao Lord dare to jump out with a mere she mystical cultivation when I still have the absolute advantage here? I was curious. That's why I spent time here to listen to this. Up until now, the time I spent was not wasted." Li Yunxin raised his head. The expression on his face was slightly calmer. "So second brother and fifth brother have this kind of support. No wonder they're not afraid of me." That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.